Chapter 263. Inside the classroom, the black-haired girl calmly agreed to her tutor's request without any fluctuations in her heart. This wasn't Lillian's first time as a remedial teacher. Last year, as the representative of the second grade, Lillian was the most outstanding student in Chris' classroom to give remedial lessons to the first grade female students. They were the same tutor, but this special relationship fluctuated according to the number of students in St. Freya Academy. The difference was huge. For example, Tutor Freeley, who had the most students, was naturally not bad at teaching, but the most important reason why the number of students far exceeded others was actually because his exams were simple. Failing in exams was not only a nightmare for students in Luoya's previous life, but also a burden that students in St. Freya Academy could not bear. There were two main reasons. One was to spend money, and the other was to quit school. Failing exams naturally meant retaking classes, and retaking classes naturally meant repaying fees. Whoring for free. Haha, that did not exist. Not only that, in order to leave a deep impression on the students, the tuition fee for retaking classes was doubled. Double the tuition fee for St. Freya Academy was not a small sum of money. As for quitting school, it was even simpler. Every year, failing more than 5 compulsory and elective classes would directly be judged by the academy as passive and neglectful. If they failed the makeup exam again at the beginning of the semester, they would immediately be expelled from the academy. Under such a strict system, there were many students quitting school every year. As the first grade who had just entered the academy, the probability of quitting school was the highest among all the grades. At this time, there was a tutor who often used the same questions in class for his exams. This kind of caring and warmth was undoubtedly touching. In Luoya's previous life, this kind of person was called a living bodhisattva, but in Shiye's St. Freya Academy, he was called the Light of Salvation Freeley. Every year, Tutor Freyley's classes had a few hundred students, but the demand did not meet the demand. Every year, students were madly snatched up, and the student quota could even be sold at a high price on the black market. However, there were also corresponding pros and cons. The students who gathered under this tutor would definitely not fail his classes, but there was basically no camaraderie to speak of. Everyone was here to freeload points. Who could differentiate between the hundreds of people? If they bumped into each other and found out that they were from the same sect, they would at most praise their teacher together, and that would be it. The Freely classroom was the representative of the large classrooms, and the students were generally indifferent to each other. The Chris classroom, on the other hand, was on the other end of the spectrum. It only nurtured the cream of the crop, and the exam was extremely difficult. There were even cases where all the students failed and had to retake the exam. However, every year, there would be a few outstanding graduates. Ever since Chris had graduated, he had been teaching at the school for a total of 18 years, but he had taught more than 100 outstanding graduates. This kind of proud result was because of the high difficulty of teaching and the strict examination. There was no doubt that compared to the relaxed and happy environment of the Freely classroom, the Chris classroom was under a lot of pressure. In the many years of teaching, there had been students who could not bear the pressure and even held grudges. However, when these people entered society, they would come back to thank their strict tutor for their hard work, whether it was because of the huge benefits they had received or because they had escaped a disaster. To a certain extent, the laziness now would be the suffering in the future. This was the life philosophy that the graduates had comprehended. For the students in the school, it was normal for them to help each other in the face of such a difficult exam. In addition, there were very few students in the Chris classroom, and there were only a few students in each batch. Therefore, the camaraderie between the students was very deep. One of the reasons why Lillian chose Chris as her tutor was that Chris, who came from the country of scholars, had a neutral stance and would not try to curry favor or be hostile toward others. The other reason was that she had taken a fancy to his strict teaching and huge and vibrant connections. One must know that Chris had trained 100 outstanding graduates in less than 20 years. The earliest batch was only in their early 30s and had yet to reach the prime of their lives. It could be said that each and every one of them had great potential, and as time passed, their influence would only grow. Even for a princess like Lillian, such a group of people was a huge resource of connections. The situation in the Austin Empire had gotten worse in recent years, and no one could predict what would happen in the future. It was necessary to accumulate strength in case of any accidents. Of course, this was Lillian's original intention. However, after 2 years of studying, Chris had become one of her rare friends, and the two of them had a good relationship. Therefore, Lillian agreed without much thought when Chris asked her to tutor the first-year students this year. Are there a lot of students this year? No, I only took in one this year. Is that so? And it's a girl? No, it's a boy this time. The red-haired woman was a little embarrassed when she said that. Lillian frowned slightly at her words. Although it sounded a little narcissistic, Lillian had been with boys for a long time, and the boys would always confess to her. The previous batch of students were all girls, so Lillian's tutoring went smoothly. However, it was a boy this time, and this situation was a little troublesome. Perhaps Chris sensed the black-haired girl's thoughts, so she helplessly added, "I can't help it. That boy's talent is too high, and I don't think the others are up to the task. Actually, I wanted to do it myself, but that would seem too biased and unfair to everyone." I see. Besides, in terms of identity as Rose, you're more suitable. Wait. The black-haired girl's eyes narrowed slightly when she noticed something wrong with Chris's words. Before she could ask, there was a knock on the classroom door. The next moment, the door was pushed open, and a young man in a cloak and scarf greeted the tutor as he removed his equipment. Teacher Chris, you're here? This is the... You are." Luoya's greeting came to an abrupt halt when she saw the familiar face. After realizing the identity of the newcomer, the black-haired girl widened her eyes and stood up. The two of them looked at each other, and the rings on their hands shone under the light. They looked at each other in silence. Chapter 264. In the silent classroom, Luoya Akit and Lillian Akit sat side by side, 2 seats apart from each other. Teacher Chris stood in front and looked at the silent and strange combination. He didn't know what to do. That shouldn't be the case. Luoya just entered the school, and he shouldn't have come into contact with Lillian for the past week. Why are the two of them so cold to each other? It's as if there's a grudge between them. The red-haired woman was puzzled. Chris naturally didn't know that the first thing Luoya did after entering the school was to have a game with Lillian. However, what she didn't know was that while she was confused, Luoya was even more confused. At this moment, the black-haired young man's mind was blank. There was only one question echoing in his mind. Question: how do I get along with the target that the ancestor has decided to make pregnant? Waiting online. It's quite urgent. The black-haired young man's head went numb. If it was before entering the secret realm, Luoya would at least know when to advance and retreat when he saw Lillian. But now, as soon as he saw Lillian's face, he couldn't help but think of Roy's reminder when he patted him on the shoulder. It's fine if I make her pregnant, but to do it behind her back? Thinking of Luoya, this scumbag couldn't help but feel guilty. He always felt that he was planning a crime. Without the moral high ground, his momentum naturally weakened. Because Luoya had been hiding for the past week, and it was impossible for him to change his teacher, he didn't properly collect information about Professor Chris's class. Now the sudden change caught him off guard. Luoya, whose mind was filled with the gift from the ancestor, was so embarrassed that he couldn't say a word. On the other side, the black-haired girl was thinking more. Is he doing it on purpose? Lillian thought about this question. Although she didn't move, her eyes gradually sharpened. As the princess of the Austin Empire, in terms of reputation, Lillian was definitely the representative of Chris's classroom. If Luoya applied for Chris as a teacher, it was impossible for him not to know that she was here. But his reaction when he entered the classroom. The girl recalled Luoya's stunned expression, and shook her head slightly in her heart. At that moment, the young man's reaction didn't seem to be fake. Lillian was very sure of this. In other words, it's a coincidence? If that's the case, to a certain extent, it might be a good thing. In the current first year of St. Freya Academy, Nua Iyer of the Theocracy and Xia Luot of Rosset had both become ringbearers. But it had to be said that these two parties were naturally hostile to Lillian of the Austin Empire. From a safe point of view, the two parties should avoid meeting each other except during the Rose Council meeting. But Luoya was different. Luoya was indeed a noble of the theocracy of Saint Maester, but he wasn't a member of the central government. Instead, he was a local noble and didn't have a direct conflict with the Austen royal family. Besides, he had a good relationship with the other two ring-bearers of the first year. As a bridge of communication, or rather a buffer, it couldn't be better. Most importantly, if she were to reject the tutoring mission now, it would be equivalent to showing a cowardly attitude. Lillian couldn't afford to show weakness like this. Besides, speaking of cowardly, how could a teacher possibly do that now? Say, do you two know each other before? After holding it in for a long time, Chris finally couldn't help but ask about the situation between the two. As soon as the words left his mouth, the two shook their heads. Not really, we've only met once before. It's not so much a meeting. It's better to say that it's a matter of position. Lillian said so in a cold voice. Her purple pupils were emotionless. She was still wary of Luoya's contact with Paul, but Chris, who didn't know about these things, didn't care so much. If that's the case, how about introducing yourselves to each other first? You two will be in the same classroom in the future. Although it's a little self-deprecating, I'm afraid that our classroom won't be able to recruit many people in the future. Besides, you two will definitely have to interact with each other, even if it's not with me. Huh? What do you mean? Luoya was a little puzzled after hearing the teacher's words, while Lillian's eyes flickered and remained silent. Chris raised his eyebrows slightly and explained. If I remember correctly, you're both of the creation branch, right? Creation branch? No, I'm from the summoning branch. Yes, you're from the summoning branch when you sign up, but the actual combat teaching is independent. It can be regarded as a branch of the summoning branch. It's a special branch that has been independent from the summoning branch in recent decades. It's specially set up for people with special circumstances like you. The black-haired boy was stunned for a while after listening to Chris's words. According to this sage teacher, the summoning branch seemed to be related to his bloodline ability, but in fact, the relationship was quite limited because the definition of the word summon was more similar to transportation. It was the most common situation of the summoning branch to transport existing things to the side through the method of summoning. Therefore, the things they summoned were already existing, whether it was summoning fire spirits or undead spirits. It was the same principle. But Luoya's situation was different. He was more similar to summoning the soul or consciousness of an ancient existence, and using curse power to construct a body according to the soul in the present world to fight. In other words, he was creating something out of nothing. That was why it was named the creation branch. And unlike the summoning branch, which did not require the use of curse power after the summoning, Luoya's supply of curse power could not be stopped during the process. Once the supply was stopped, the body constructed by Luoya's curse power would disintegrate because it could not bear the powerful souls of Gulan Dayer and the others. Chris grasped the key points and explained in a few sentences, which made Luoya suddenly enlightened. He finally understood where the dissonance in his heart came from, but then a new question emerged. Lillian is also from the creation branch. Chapter 265. In the empty classroom, Luoya leaned against the table and sighed helplessly as he watched Lillian leave through the door. After a series of communications, Luoya had basically confirmed that Lillian didn't want to have a good relationship with him and wanted to keep a distance from him instead. Regarding this situation, Luoya was honestly a little puzzled. In his communications with Lillian, he had always felt a faint sense of inconsistency. For example, the reasons Lillian gave seemed reasonable, but on the other hand, there were also many benefits to maintaining a good relationship with Luoya. Although it was normal for people to consider problems from different perspectives, Luoya still felt that it was impossible for someone as intelligent as Lillian to not have thought of it. Could it be that something interfered with her choice? Luoya thought so and shook his head after a moment. These groundless guesses weren't what he needed to do now. In fact, he still had a lot of things to do. The Ring of the Black Rose was an inheritance that Luoya received from his ancestors. It was also the culprit that allowed his guiding spirit to grow to a diameter of 5 meters. But it had to be said that Luoya hadn't worn the ring in the week since he received it. Being chased by a group of old men every day, Luoya was really worried that someone who recognized the ring would see it. And according to Roy, the ring of the black rose would give guidance, which was undoubtedly a problem. What exactly was the so-called guidance? Luoya didn't know, so after weighing the pros and cons, he decided to study it in detail after he got his own territory. The sound of students' footsteps gradually increased in the corridor outside the door. The noise made Luoya interrupt his thoughts and walk out of the classroom. Chris chose this time before the morning class to let Luoya meet Senior Lillian. After accomplishing this goal, it was naturally time for class. The classes in the first half of the first year were relatively basic and mostly academic. The main purpose was to cultivate the students' learning habits and abilities. For example, Luoya's first class in school was mathematics, which reminded him of the advanced mathematics classes in university in his previous life. But the difficulty of the class and the classroom couldn't be compared at all. There was no doubt that the difficulty of the courses was relatively simple compared to his previous life, but the classrooms were truly imposing. Most of the teaching buildings in St. Freya's Academy were made of stone with hundreds of years of history, but because they were well maintained, they did not look old. The academic classes were arranged in a staircase model, and the windows had plenty of natural light, so it was exceptionally bright. The seat was made of a single piece of wood. The wood used was warm wood from the Austen Empire. It was a kind of tree that contained curse power that could adjust the temperature. Regardless of whether the outside world was cold or warm, it wouldn't be affected too much. Chairs made of this kind of wood were the same. It wasn't too hard to sit on, and it was quite comfortable. It was one of the specialties of the Austen Empire. In addition, there were reliefs with a long history, exquisite chandeliers, soft carpets, incense burners that exuded a delicate fragrance, and all kinds of aristocratic items could be seen everywhere. It completely subverted Luoya's impression of a traditional school. He also understood why St. Freya's Academy was called an aristocratic school, and why the tuition was so expensive. For example, the incense burner not only looked beautiful, but it was also a curse vessel. The burning incense was also specially made, and had the effect of refreshing the mind. Many other parts in the classroom were the same. They were all curse vessels that were beneficial to learning. To be honest, Roja felt that it would be very difficult to fail in this kind of classroom. With so much gold and silver, he was afraid that even a pig who knows how to speak could pass the passing line. Is this the power of money? I love it, I love it. Luoya looked around the classroom and said to himself. As a person who went to school almost all his life in his previous life, Luoya had a small habit. He liked to sit in the last row in class because he didn't like the feeling of a group of people looking at him from behind. It made him feel insecure. Of course, he knew that this was actually an illusion. After all, everyone looked at the teacher and the mobile phone in class. The latter might be more common. But in St. Freya's Academy, Luoya knew that this was not an illusion. It was better to say that until now, wherever he went, he was in a state of being watched. Feeling that many students in front of him deliberately looked back, Luoya sighed helplessly. He had no good way to deal with this situation at present. He could only let time dilute the students' curiosity. Fortunately, as it was the first class at St. Freya's Academy, the freshmen still attached great importance to it, and their attitude in class was generally very serious. Because there were too many freshmen, a basic subject like mathematics was divided according to the student's teacher. For example, as a student of teacher Chris, Luoya, who was alone, attended the class with the largest number of students. Freely classroom. It was also because of this that Nua Iyer and Xiaoluo were not by his side. The two girls' respective retinue of noble elites followed them to become the students of the same teacher. They were Catherine Classroom, of the St. Mestre Theocracy, and Laura Classroom, of the Rose Business United Nations. Catherine Classroom's specialty was ritualistic curses, including healing, purification, and many other fields. At first glance, it was clear that they had a close relationship with the Holy See. Teacher Catherine West was the daughter of the head of one of the 5 major noble families in the theocracy, the Marquis West family. It was basically impossible for her to have any crooked thoughts, and their relationship could be said to be quite solid. Laura Classroom was the strongest classroom for astrology and prophecy curses. The most famous thing was probably the accurate prediction of the Great Storm in the Scholar Country a few decades ago. The Supreme Council responded and made adjustments accordingly, greatly reducing the casualties and property losses of the people. As for Laura herself, she was even more reliable, and her surname was Sorofia. Teacher Laura was, strictly speaking, Xia Luo's great-aunt. In Rose, she was also a well-known representative of the Sorofia family. It was naturally reassuring for such a person to teach their own juniors. Since then, the 3 first-year ring-bearers had been assigned, and Luoya had no fate with the 2 girls in the academic class. It was impossible for the situation of the local tyrant holding the central leader hostage during the opening ceremony. Nuo Ayer and Xia Luo were naturally unwilling to have such an assignment, but considering the problem of distraction during class, they didn't say anything. After all, as the heirs of 2 countries, Nuo Ayer and Xia Luo came to school with a mission and purpose. At the very least, they couldn't have bad grades, so it was necessary for them to pay attention in class. Although there was a gap due to different natural learning abilities, if one wanted to be a top student, they had to put in some effort, especially in St. Freya Academy. Even geniuses like Nuo Ayer and Xia Luo could be overtaken if they slacked off. Of course, Luoya liked this assignment the most. After all, when he thought of Nuo Ayer's little tricks in class, Luoya felt his brain heat up. Miss Angel seemed to have awakened a new sadist attribute recently. She liked to secretly do some shameful things in public to observe Luoya's reaction. Every time she saw Luoya's frightened face, she would get excited. Xia Luo wasn't far behind. She could always come up with some strange ideas, such as the groundbreaking concept of couple outfits in this world. She even wanted to design it herself. Although the outfits weren't out yet, Luoya could already imagine the chaos that would occur if Nuo Ayer found out. After school started, Nuo Ayer and Xia Luo each had their own private building and training ground. More and more students were wearing the golden rose and red rose insignia on their chests. Luoya didn't have ready-made troops like the theocracy in Luoya, so he had to recruit from scratch. Fortunately, Luoya's reputation was out there, so it wasn't difficult to recruit people. After a morning of classes, Luoya finished his lunch and left the central campus. According to the schedule from a week ago, Luoya's mountain manor, Sangji Hall, was more or less ready to live in. After an hour of bumpy ride, the youth arrived in front of the blue-themed building for the first time. Overall, the scale of this mountain secret realm exceeded Luoya's expectations. From the spacious entrance to the courtyard to the fountain, to the size and luxury of the main building, Luoya was very satisfied. As its backyard, the secret realm of MT Mist was rich in resources. It was more than enough to hunt for wild animals. Under the guidance of the staff, Luoya walked through the corridor that was decorated in a traditional style. It had a luxurious style unique to the second era of the Austin Empire. Luoya's heart was filled with the joy of freeloading. After a general tour of the building and confirming the location, Luoya began to consider the recruitment of faction members, which was the problem of people. Although there was a bit of suspicion of cheating, Luoya actually had information about the future of many people in the game. Therefore, to a certain extent, he could be targeted. Therefore, he wasn't in a hurry. After thinking for a while, night fell. After tasting the cooking of Sangji Hall, Luoya felt that it was passable. He silently looked at the black ring in his hand in the spacious master bedroom. Chapter 266. This is. The moment the black-haired youth opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was the dusky sky. A cold breeze blew on his body, and the sound of trees swaying in the wind echoed in his ears. Luoya felt the hard ground without any softness under his body. His golden pupils were filled with confusion. He turned his head slightly to the left and right, and found that there was nothing around him. So cold. This isn't a dream? The youth who was awakened by the cold shivered slightly. The overly realistic touch made Luoya keenly feel that something was wrong. He sat up and found that he seemed to be on a rooftop. His slightly higher vision allowed him to see something familiar. It was the top part of a building with a pointed roof. It looked like a tall tower, and it should have been built a few hundred years ago. The reason why Luoya recognized it was very simple. It was because it was one of the candidates for the headquarters of the Green Rose sect, the tower in the center of the academy. When he saw this building, Luoya finally woke up completely. He suddenly got up and ran to the edge of the rooftop. He looked down at the vast campus in front of him and was stunned for a moment. What's going on? Am I kidnapped again? No, that's impossible. The overly bizarre thought only lasted for a moment before it was rejected by Luoya. Not to mention the possibility of being unknowingly taken out of the mountains to the center of the campus as a four-source level extraordinaire. The main point was that Luoya had Gulandair and Paitila by his side. Although Gulandair and Paitila usually stayed in their own spaces and occasionally seemed to visit each other, the passage between them and Luoya was always connected. Unless it was a close relationship like Nua Ayer or Xia Luot. If anyone wanted to do anything to Luoya while he was asleep, the two ancient gods would definitely discover it. Once there was danger, they would even urgently use Luoya's curse power to forcefully appear. It was completely impossible for him to be taken away by some inexplicable person and left on the rooftop to be blown by the wind. Did this mean that there was something special going on? Could it be that the Nua Ayer wanted to come to the rooftop to play with him? No matter what, this is still Luoya, who had no clue, shook his head and stopped the dirty thoughts in his mind. He decided to contact the huge skeleton and Mother Earth. However, in the next second, Luoya's face suddenly turned ugly. How could this be? The black-haired youth widened his eyes in disbelief. Could it be that the passageway was gone? In the 5 years since he had obtained the crown, origin substance and met the Gulandair, this was the first time that Luoya had been unable to contact the ancient gods in a non-historical situation. Could it be that we're currently in a historical episode? Did I accidentally trigger something? Luoya muttered to himself and forced himself to calm down. However, after thinking about it seriously and sensing the origin substance for a while, he still rejected this possibility. As Luoya's bloodline ability, he could clearly sense it once it was activated. Moreover, even in a historical episode, the passageway of the ancient gods would only be temporarily blocked by the new ancient gods, just like Paitila back then. However, the passageway had now disappeared as if it had never appeared. This also represented an extremely terrifying matter. Luoya could no longer borrow the power of the ancient gods, even if it was only a weakened version of their bodies. Calm down, the ability of the origin substance cannot be changed. In reality, it's impossible for me to lose the ability to summon the Gulandair and the others. Therefore, by inference, this isn't reality. Is it a dream or something else? The reason for this appearance? Is it because of the ring? Luoya pinched the space between his eyebrows as he analyzed. He remembered that before going to sleep, he did not take off the black rose ring. Connecting this to Roy's words earlier, could this be the so-called guidance? The black-haired youth looked down at St. Freya Academy in the middle of the night. It was already past midnight, and the bustling campus during the day was now deathly silent. Specks of light dotted the huge buildings, but not only did it not give off a feeling of brightness, it made other places seem even darker. Quiet, too quiet. Such a thought appeared in Luoya's mind, and the youth suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. The dark campus, the absence of the ancient gods, and the strange silence all gathered together raised Luoya's vigilance to the extreme. He glanced behind him, and saw that the door leading to the rooftop was wide open. The wooden door swayed left and right in the wind, but it was completely dark inside, as if it was the mouth of a beast that came out of nowhere. I have to take a look. Such a thought appeared in Luoya's mind. Chapter 267. Dear, did you not sleep well last night? At noon, the reddish-brown-haired girl looked at the black-haired boy across the table and asked. Luoya, who was pinching his eyebrows, looked up and stared at Xia Luot's emerald eyes. After hesitating for a moment, he nodded slightly. Something like that. Last night, I had a nightmare. A nightmare? Well, some weird nightmares. The black-haired boy replied with a smile, and turned to look at the scenery below. At this time, Luoya and Xia Luot were at the tallest restaurant in the academy, the Clear Sky Tower. It was located at the edge of the commercial street. It was said that it used to be a weather observation tower, but it was later converted into a luxurious restaurant. The entire restaurant was extremely high-end. There were no seats in the tower, only 4 tables with 8 seats on 4 balconies. They only provided lunch and dinner, which meant that they could serve up to 16 people a day. Although they only served a small number of people, the revenue of the Clear Sky Tower could be ranked in the top 3 among the high-end restaurants in St. Freya Academy. From this, one could see how expensive it was. But correspondingly, this place also had its own unique selling points, such as the scenery overlooking the academy and the top chefs of the scholars' country. Unfortunately, if it was yesterday, Luoya would have enjoyed Xia Luo's kindness. But today, looking down at the campus at noon, Luoya had a strange feeling. He could not help but recall what it looked like at night. Last night's nightmare brought too many questions to Luoya. The empty academy in the dark, the creepy black-clothed clergy, the whispers in front of the bed, and the empty bed. Until he woke up, Luoya had no clue about all of this, especially after he found that he did not have the side effect of the frozen earth. He could not even determine the nature of this nightmare. Was it the guidance of the Black Rose Ring? Or was it just a simple nightmare? If it was the so-called guidance, then what did it want Luoya to do? Was it looking for clues, or fighting those strange monsters? The academy below was bustling with people coming and going, but in his dream, it was deathly still. This strong contrast made Luoya feel a little absent-minded, but before he could recover, a pair of hands had already touched his cheeks. "Darling, what's wrong with you?" "Huh." Luoya raised his eyes and discovered that Xia Luo had unknowingly walked in front of him. Her emerald eyes gazed at him with some worry. Sensing the girl's worry, Luoya hurriedly adjusted his state and opened his mouth to explain. I didn't sleep well last night, and the tutor's class in the morning was a little difficult. So that's how it is." "Indeed, Teacher Chris's lessons are known for their difficulty. I can't help you in this regard," the reddish-brown-haired girl said as she sat on Luoya's lap and wrapped her arms around his neck. Luoya blushed when he felt the warmth and softness on his body, but he didn't resist. After all, this scene was nothing compared to last year when they shared a bed together. "However, I might be able to help with nightmares." Nightmares? That's right. There's a lot of dream content in astrology and prophecy. This can be considered my field," the girl said as she blinked her eyes. Hearing this, Luoya came to a realization. The young lady observed the flickering eyes of the boy, and suddenly reached out her hand to cover his eyes. "Don't move. This is a curse to dispel nightmares." Is that so?" The reddish-brown-haired girl said this lie with a serious expression. Luoya, who thought that this girl was a professional, closed his eyes in relief. However, to the boy's surprise, what he waited for wasn't a curse, but a touch of warmth on his lips. "Xia Luo? Yes, this is a blessing kiss curse. The effect should be quite good. If you still have nightmares today, come and find me tomorrow." The young lady who successfully stole a kiss was very calm when facing Luoya's doubtful gaze. She was as kind as a nurse who gave instructions to a patient after giving him an injection. Luoya looked at such a girl, and the questioning words were stuck in his mouth. Could it really be a blessing? But there didn't seem to be any reaction from the curse just now. Could it be related to astrology? Wait a minute. By the way, Xia Luo, there's something I want to ask you. Is there a place similar to this in the astrology department's building? Similar to this? Yes, it's a place with a wide view overlooking the campus. It should be something like a rooftop. Chapter 268. Lillian Aikman's and Luoya's tutoring was, to a certain extent, a confidential matter. There were many reasons to keep it a secret. For example, the identity of the two of them. A princess of an empire giving tutoring to a noble was not right. And from the point of view of a ring-bearer, once it was made public, it would make Roha feel like he was under Lillian. After all, Luoya was going to form his own team. Now that his boss was Lillian's student, would the Blue Rose faction still be able to raise their heads in front of the Purple Rose's security department in the future? Of course, there were more practical problems. For example, Nua Iyer and Xia Luo would object. From Lillian's perspective, this matter violated Emperor Lucas's inexplicable order. So of course, it could not be made public. Both sides had similar problems, so it could be said that they hit it off in terms of confidentiality. But it had to be said that Lillian was really good at irritating people. For example, this secret code to open the door. Teacher's mission? What the hell is that? Lillian had to repeat this secret code once every tutoring session as if telling Luoya not to think too much about it. Of course, the young man strongly opposed it, but as the saying goes, the situation was stronger than the person. Her Royal Highness meant what she said. Luoya was speechless for a long time, but he could only ignore her and secretly slander her in his heart. Hee, do you think you are the only one with a mission? This is my ancestor's mission. After comforting himself fiercely in his heart, Luoya pushed open the heavy door and entered the classroom. He saw Lillian standing in front of the podium. Today, the black-haired girl was wearing a simple black Aston-style dress. The long dress covered her legs and had a corset design that outlined her waistline. Because it was a simple dress, her chest was not very tight. Instead, it set off her waist and made her look very full. The small bow tie on her chest embellished it, making her look playful and cute. The girl who had changed into a new dress stunned Luoya, and he could not help but take a few more glances. Although Lillian was too cold to him, she was still very pleasing to the eye. Especially when he saw her flat belly, Luoya's heart skipped a beat. He inexplicably thought of Roy's words. Wait. What am I thinking? Luoya, whose brain overheated, hurriedly averted his gaze, walked to the first row, and sat down. He looked at Lillian on the podium and was speechless again. Normally, students would sit side by side during one-on-one tutoring as it was more convenient to be closer to each other. However, it was obvious that Lillian didn't want to sit next to Roja. So this tutoring session was really like a teacher and a student. Roja couldn't say anything about this and could only accept it. However, unlike what he imagined, although Lillian was indifferent to him, her teaching was very serious, and she was more meticulous than Roja expected. Luoya thought that a genius like Lillian would also teach the stream of consciousness. After all, it was natural for most geniuses to do things that others could not do. But to his surprise, Lillian turned out to be a rigorous academic. Her understanding of all kinds of knowledge was on point. Luoya even felt that she was better than teacher Chris to a certain extent. The things that he did not understand during the day gradually became clear under the girl's explanation. Luoya was enlightened. At the same time, he could not help but believe in the black-haired girl on the podium. It made sense for Chris to get Lillian to tutor him. Her lectures were indeed good. When the two of them explained the same problem from different perspectives, the effect was no longer as simple as 1 + 1. Instead, it broadened Luoya's horizons. In this high-density, compressed biscuit-like learning, Luoya's expression gradually became serious. Lillian, on the other hand, was still the same. Her face was as cold as ever. If Luoya were not sitting there, he would have thought that she was teaching the air. Wait, she doesn't really treat me like air, does she? Such doubts arose in Luoya's mind. But not long after, Lillian personally dispelled them. About an hour after the lecture was over, the black-haired girl looked at Luoya clearly for the first time. Is there anything else you don't understand? Probably not. Is that so? The black-haired girl nodded slightly after hearing Luoya's words. Just when Luoya thought the class was about to end, Lillian suddenly said, "Give it a try." Huh? What? Give it a try. Spell control line. The black-haired boy looked at the girl in front of him and blinked. For a moment he was in a daze. Not only did she give an explanation, but she even included practice? That's a little responsible. But, recalling the practice during class, Luoya's face stiffened. No matter what, Lillian was a beautiful girl, and extraordinarily beautiful. Male genes would naturally resist showing weakness in front of such a girl. But after looking into the girl's calm eyes for a moment, Luoya sighed and obediently extended his hand. Chapter 269. At night, St. Freya Academy was bustling with activity. People came and went in the business district, and there was a lot of traffic in front of the high-class restaurants. The hormones of both men and women were secreting at an accelerated rate here. However, in the isolated classroom 14 of Zone 1, the atmosphere between a man and a woman was exceptionally stiff. Senior, what do you mean by that? Literally, it's impossible for you to pass this class. The black-haired girl looked at Luoya, who had an ugly expression, and added faintly, I don't know what you've experienced in the past, and I don't want to know, but as a result, your curse power usage habits have been fixed. If you want to control it carefully, you need to completely change your past pattern. This is equivalent to negating all your previous efforts. Lillian's words made Roja's eyes widen in shock. All his efforts in the past weren't as simple as that. Roja's method of using the curse power was practiced, and now it's impossible to do it again. Perhaps she noticed the teenager's thoughts. Lillian was silent for a moment before speaking again. Although you can't control it carefully, your curse power is exceptionally outstanding in terms of explosive power, and you can maintain a stable output at a high frequency. This situation is very rare. But if I can't pass the curse power control class, I can't pass the Ringbearer's extraordinary class. Should I ask Chris to go easy on me because of this? But if that's the case, how am I supposed to behave in the classroom? Luoya's expression was heavy, and he was vexed, but he did not expect Lillian's voice to suddenly ring in his ears. It's not like there's no way. Senior? If you can't do something simple, you can learn something more difficult. Curse power control is actually a simplified version of curse power compression control. In terms of actual combat, only endurance is preserved, and the most difficult compression part is abandoned. But for you, this part might be easier. The black-haired girl said as she walked down the podium. The light emitted from her fingertips converged into a thin white line, and she waved her hand at the hemp rope in Luoya's palm. The hemp rope was instantly cut into two. It's useless if it's crude. The key is the technique. As Lillian spoke, she stretched out her hand to show Luoya the unscathed thin thread. Seeing this, the young man didn't have the time to think about the girl's dirty lines. Instead, he carefully observed the shining silver thread. Compressing it to the extreme will result in a qualitative change. If you can't control the quantity, this is the only way. You can't do it now, so. The black-haired girl looked down at the youth below her. Her voice was calm and cold as she spoke. Extra classes. The most unsatisfactory thing in life was to have more and more remedial classes. In the dark of the campus, Luoya sighed and walked out of the teaching building, following the crowd that was returning to the dormitory after self-study. It could be said that Lillian's lesson today had given Luoya a blow that was neither too big nor too small. Not only was Luoya unable to control his curse power, but more importantly, it was the impact that Lillian had on him. Regardless of whether it was her sharp observation of his curse power that allowed her to infer his experience, or her cutting of the hemp rope with a single thread, they all vividly displayed Lillian's intelligent mind and powerful strength. Although Luoya had long known that she was a genius, he still couldn't help but feel that there was a gap between them. However, he had to admit that Lillian's lessons were still beneficial to Luoya. The most important thing was that the girl was serious and responsible. This actually touched Luoya quite a bit. Before this, he had never thought that Lillian would actually take the initiative to give him extra classes. However, when he thought about the girl's attitude, Luoya was speechless, especially when Luoya thanked Lillian for teaching him at the end of the class. I've said it before. I'm just doing my duty. I don't need your thanks. I'm only giving you extra classes because your situation is too bad. The black-haired girl calmly turned around and left after saying that. Only Luoya, who was supposed to wait in the classroom for 10 minutes according to the arrangement, was left behind. He also didn't know what to do with himself. Just how much does this girl not want to have anything to do with me? Luoya, who was pondering over this question, sighed. He couldn't figure out where Lillian's resistance came from. However, no matter what, it was good to have a senior to guide him. Moreover, although Lillian didn't look at him during the lesson, he could still look at her. He had to admit that she was quite pleasing to the eye, especially her waist that contrasted against her chest. Chapter 270. Before midnight, in a restaurant far away from the central campus, Luoya's cheeks twitched slightly as he looked at the black-haired boy who was eating and drinking. Since coming to this world for more than 10 years, as a noble heir, Luoya had seen many young masters and young ladies, but there were not many who could eat in such a hurry. Looking at the boy who was choking on a chicken leg, Luoya even had the illusion that he was taking in a beggar. No, are you here to eat and drink? Chatting while eating, you're eating while I'm chatting? Picking up the glass and taking a sip of wine, Luoya looked at the helpless face of young Master Paul, and couldn't help but think of the beauty and elegance of another member of the Arcaren family an hour ago. Although they were both Arcaren, the gap between them was really bigger than a human and a dog. Luoya sipped the wine and sighed in his heart, while on the other side, Paul was drinking like a whale. After a while, he put down the glass and gasped for breath, as if he had just come back to life. Brother Luoya, thank you for your hospitality. I'm a bit hungry, so my table manners are a bit ugly, sorry. No, so why don't you eat? Actually, I lost my money for food, and I've been hungry for 2 days. Why don't you lose yours too? Wait, no. Luoya looked at the boy who was scratching his face in embarrassment across the table, and suddenly remembered something. He remembered that there was indeed such a plot in Eye of the Recorder. Paul, who had just entered the school, lost his money for food and was hungry for 2 days. He leaned against the wall and was about to faint, but he was found by Xiao Luot, who was passing by. Xiao Luot, who was stopped by the car, recognized Paul. The girl who was supposed to hate Paul sympathized with him and treated him to a meal. Because of this, Paul was deeply grateful, which foreshadowed the following plot. Originally, this incident was the first plot point of Paul and Xiao Luot after their first encounter. Luoya should have interfered, but because there were too many things recently, Luoya forgot about it. But he didn't expect that Paul would come directly to him to eat. They could all be eaten. Realizing the significance of this meal, Luoya widened his eyes and felt better all of a sudden. He waved his hand and ordered several more dishes. He couldn't wait to feed Paul with a month's worth of food today. His eyes became friendlier than ever. It had to be said that this incident was of great significance to Luoya. Normally, in order to prevent Luoya from meeting Nuo Iyer and Xiao Luot every few days, Luoya would have to think hard about the plot, and try not to let Paul meet Nuo Iyer and Xiao Luot every few days. However, it had to be said that doing so would take up a lot of Luoya's energy, and it would also show that Luoya did not trust the two girls, which made him a little uncomfortable. But now things were different. Luoya was not moving, and Paul was fully automatic. There was no need to guard against them. If they had a problem, they would come straight to them. They might even avoid contact with the two girls in the future for the sake of friendship. It could only be said that the facts proved that, excluding the physiological needs, men were still willing to look for men if they had a problem. After all, it was easy to ask between brothers, and there was no unnecessary self-esteem in front of the opposite sex. In order to express his gratitude to Paul, and at the same time to encourage the teenager to look for him if he had a problem in the future, Luoya specially opened a bottle of 30-year-old wine in the cellar. After all, this was a facility of the school, and 30-year-old wine was already the limit. If it was in Akat Hill, he would even be willing to open a 100-year-old Luoya. In the face of such a generous good brother, Paul was very touched. In fact, he didn't really meet Luoya many times, but every time they met, it was at a critical moment, and he gave him a lot of help. Whether it was taking him to school or supporting him in front of the seniors, Luoya never asked for any reward from Paul. He didn't even need his gratitude. Now that he came to freeload, Luoya not only didn't dislike him, but was also very enthusiastic. This made Paul feel emotional for a while, but at the same time he couldn't say his other purpose. "And what's wrong? Is there anything you want to say?" After drinking a glass of wine, Luoya, who sensed that Paul seemed to have something on his mind, blinked and asked. Upon hearing his words, the teenager hesitated. After a long time, he finally mustered the courage to ask Luoya, "Big brother Luoya, I can join your faction?" The sudden request stunned Luoya, and also made the atmosphere in the restaurant tense all of a sudden. Luoya put down the glass of wine and looked carefully at the teenager opposite him. For a moment he couldn't give an answer because one thing was inevitable when talking about Paul, and that was Paul's elder sister, Lillian Aikman. Normally speaking, as someone of the same race, Paul would naturally join Lillian's Purple Rose. But the farce played by the seniors of the Austen Empire when he entered the school seemed to have changed his mind. At that time, many of the people who shouted along with them were students of the Austen Empire, so I feel that joining them is a little… As Paul spoke, an ugly smile gradually appeared on his face. In the end he couldn't continue and could only laugh. Upon looking at this young man, Luoya knitted his brows and felt that something in his heart was touched. Indeed, as an illegitimate child, Paul's living environment was much worse than Luoya's. Although the Akate family had certain things that other ancient families couldn't compare to and couldn't bear, at least on the surface, Luoya had always been treated well. The Saint Maester Empire was prosperous and stable, and the Akate family's military strength was unrivaled. Due to a certain Huang Shu who had a good relationship with the queen, their territory was vast, and as long as they didn't court death, they wouldn't die. Not only that, but they also had a high status wherever they went. But Paul was different. Although he had reached the standard of a prince, he didn't have the right to inherit the throne. Not only that, but he was also criticized because of his illegitimate identity. His two elder brothers couldn't wait for him to die immediately. As for his elder sister, he didn't know if it was because of Luoya, but he felt that compared to the game, Lillian's attention wasn't on Paul. Aren't you obsessed with your younger brother? Why don't you want him? Chapter 271. In the bedroom, Luoya put his cane aside, sat on a chair, and sighed as he looked at the night outside the window. Although he agreed to Paul's request at the dinner table, Luoya still felt a little guilty when he thought about facing Lillian, who was tutoring him. Isn't it a dead end to snatch a younger brother who has a brother complex? What should I use to compensate her? Luoya scratched his head helplessly. He could only put these thoughts behind him and go to the bathroom to wash up. Soaking in the warm bathtub, Luoya stroked the pale blue ring on his hand. His mind was in a mess. Although he refuted Paul's words before, what Luoya said at the dinner table was also his true thoughts. As a preceptor, he enjoyed the convenience brought by this position and received the admiration of the students. Naturally, he had to pay a price. At least, when he discovered a possible crisis on campus, he should take the initiative to investigate the situation instead of shrinking back. The sense of responsibility in his heart overcame his fear, making Luoya's will firm. He got up and dried his slender body, walked to the bed with a bath towel, took off the blue rose, silently put on the black rose ring, and then lay on the bed and closed his eyes. When he opened his eyes again, Luoya was already in darkness. He poured the power of the curse into his eyes. What he saw was not the gloomy sky from yesterday, but a somewhat unfamiliar ceiling. He got up and scanned the surrounding environment. A soft red carpet, tables and chairs made of warm wood, a podium with some teaching materials, an extinguished incense burner, and a chandelier that was used to enhance the light source, but now it was completely dark. This was everything in the vicinity. It was a small classroom. Luoya, who found no enemies, breathed a sigh of relief. He raised his hand and looked at the ring in his hand. He was basically sure that this dream was related to the black rose ring. In order to rule out all options, Luoya went to bed naked. He had nothing on him except for the black rose ring. Fortunately, after entering this dream, his clothes were still his usual clothes, and there was no midnight running scene. The black-haired boy stood up and cast a lightness spell. He then adjusted his breathing and walked towards the door of the classroom. The doors of St. Freya Academy's classrooms were thick and heavy, but they were all high-end goods, so the sound of the door opening was very soft. After carefully listening to the movements in the corridor, Luoya gently pushed the door open. He looked left and right in the dim corridor, then went to the window to confirm the floor. When he found that he was on the second floor, he thought for a moment and resisted the eerie feeling in the building, and did not directly jump down from the window. Cautiously going down to the first floor, Luoya glanced at the open door of the teaching building. The night wind blew into the building, and the gorgeous chandelier on the ceiling swayed and produced a tinkling sound. The black-haired youngster looked at the dark corner outside the guardhouse and suddenly froze. The next moment, his pupils suddenly shrank. Someone was there. Luoya stared at the shadows where the lights in the guardhouse could not reach. Although it was extremely dark, Luoya could see something moving in the shadows. It was the black armored soldier from yesterday. The youngster retracted his head and leaned against the wall to adjust his breathing. He analyzed the current situation in his mind. It was obvious that Roha couldn't fight in close quarters with his opponent while he was unarmed. The only thing he could do was to attack with all his strength. Yesterday, Luoya froze the black-clothed clergy into an ice sculpture. Based on what he saw later, these black-armored soldiers should be the clergy's subordinates. In theory, they should be easier to deal with. After sorting out his thoughts, Luoya dispelled his fear. After counting down from 3, he rushed out of the staircase and raised his hand to release a ray of cold air. Frozen earth. From rushing out to releasing the skill, Luoya's movements were as smooth as flowing water. This sudden attack was obviously not within the enemy's expectations. The black-armored soldier was frozen before he could even draw his sword. Seeing this result, Luoya was completely relieved. At the same time, he rushed to the enemy's side. After snatching the enemy's sword, he removed the cold air and stabbed the gap in the armor. At the same time, he let the cold air rush into the enemy's body. After confirming that the enemy was completely unresponsive, Luoya looked around and dragged the soldier's corpse into a nearby classroom. After seeing the black-clothed clergy's glory last night, Luoya was somewhat uncertain about the nature of these damn things. When he discovered that there was an enemy that was alone, Luoya decisively pulled one of them to study. At least he wanted to know what his enemy was. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will be victorious in 100 battles. This was the crystallization of the wisdom of the ancient people in his previous world. And reality proved that Luoya's decision was correct. This guy has 2 hearts? No. This is... Inside the classroom, Luoya held a ruler and picked up 2 connected pieces of flesh stained with black blood. Looking at the green-skinned monster on the ground, he felt a chill down his spine. Reality proved that it was right to be cautious when facing an unfamiliar enemy. Since thawing until now, Luoya had spent more than an hour dissecting the monster. Among them, 1 big and 1 small heart in Luoya's hand was the most representative. If he didn't know that the enemy was a problem, he would most likely be ambushed when he stabbed the enemy's heart and let his guard down. Although it was impossible for these guys to threaten Luoya's life with their strength, but when he thought of the person whose heart was pierced was still moving, he felt a burst of goosebumps. Fortunately, I discovered it in advance. Like I said, I can tell at a glance that you're not human. Wait, this seems to have grown later? After carefully observing for a while under the moonlight, Luoya stared at the smaller heart and narrowed his eyes. He felt that the smaller heart seemed to have been cut off from the bigger one and grew later on. Chapter 272. In the dark corridor, an ingenious persecution was being carried out in an orderly manner. Can't you talk softly? Keep talking. The black-haired teenager was in a place where the light could reach. As he spoke, he constantly struck the iron can in the darkness with his sword. After a few hits, the black-armored swordsman who was hesitating at the boundary of the light and shadow fell to the ground. Then, he kicked the black-armored swordsman into the light. To his surprise, the black-armored soldier under the light didn't seem to be affected. It seemed that the light in the guard room only made them not want to come close, but it didn't have any lethality. The teenager sighed and dispelled his dream of being invincible with the light. Then he chopped off the enemy's head. As he knew that these monsters hated the light in the guard room, Luoya simply dragged the corpse under the light. With the help of the light source, he carried out another medical study. The result was that this monster's physiological structure was different from the previous one. It didn't change its mind, but it had an extra liver. I didn't expect it to be a liver emperor. Luoya raised his eyebrows and returned the blood-stained organs to the original owner. Then he observed the body shape and found that the soldier didn't have a Kirin arm. The individual differences are huge. This is a bit difficult to deal with. The black-haired teenager muttered to himself. His gaze gradually became serious. If these monsters were in the same situation, it would be fine. But now, each of them had a strange shape, and their weaknesses were different. The only way to deal a fatal blow was to target the hardest part of the brain. After that, Luoya did the same thing and killed another black-armored soldier at the entrance of the teaching building. However, other than further confirming that each of these guys was different, he didn't find anything. He didn't find anything about the monsters, but he did find something about the Black Rose ring. Why do I feel that the Black Rose seems to be brighter? Is it an illusion? Or? Luoya looked at the ring after killing 3 black-armored soldiers. He inexplicably felt that the unknown material of the rose was more dazzling under the light. However, before he could study it further, the room's alarm rang again in his ears. Ring ring, ring ring ring, ring ring ring. His body shook slightly. Luoya opened his eyes on the bed and temporarily bid farewell to the dark world. On a sunny morning, Luoya had breakfast at the dining table with Paul, who stayed overnight. Every year, as long as it didn't exceed the stipulated amount, St. Freya Academy could reimburse it. They were indeed rich and overbearing. As for the excess, Luoya, as the acting lord of Acate Hill, had the ability to pay for it. That was why he was able to drink so happily yesterday. It was inevitable that they would taste good when they were eating and drinking legally with public funds. During breakfast, Luoya didn't know why Paul looked at him with eyes full of respect, which made Luoya feel inexplicably uncomfortable, but it also gave him time to reconsider some issues. Luoya carefully considered Paul's matter, and felt that it was necessary to continue the existence of Paul's consulting department in the original work. Although Luoya was beaten to death by the protagonist and the 4 female protagonists, that was only internal strife. In Eye of the Recorder, Paul was able to develop a relationship beyond friendship with so many beautiful girls who were hostile at the beginning. Naturally, it was not by empty words, but by common experiences. Luoya recalled Paul's experience in the game and sighed, but he was unaware of what he had done for so many years. Paul was eating and drinking as usual. His eyes were on his elder brother, but he couldn't guess what he was thinking. The choice in a critical moment reflected a person's nature. As the saying goes, it is easy to change mountains and rivers, but it is difficult to change one's nature. Just like in the ordinary days of life, it is often impossible to see a person's nature. Only in a bad environment and in the face of a crisis can the nature of a person be seen, and who is hypocritical and who is real. And these moments of crisis were simply external factors. Luoya did change a lot of things over the years. Over time, he even changed the power structure of St. Freya Academy. But the good in the game were influenced by him, so how could the villains bow their heads and worship him? Obviously, this was impossible. For example, the 2 clowns who made things difficult for Paul when he entered the school did not change at all. In fact, they were even stronger. And in the entire villain camp, people of this level were not even considered minions. They were completely roadside monsters. Even after Luoya, the original villain boss, cleared his name, the events that Paul would encounter in the future only reduced a part. There were still many difficulties. These difficulties were not only Paul's obstacles, but they would also affect the entire campus and even involve the girls, causing a devastating blow to Luoya's beautiful life. If these external factors were not eliminated, Luoya would not be able to sleep well. In order to get rid of these scum, and in order to show his prophetic advantage of knowing the plot of Recorder's Eye, Luoya had to let Paul restore part of the plot as much as possible. At least, the consultation department as the introduction of various events was indispensable. But unlike the original work, the consultation department, which was originally a miscellaneous department in the academy, would change into the consultation department of the Rose Guild. Paul would be in charge of the specific matters, and Luoya would be in the background. After all, it was an old tradition for the faction members of St. Freya Academy to form or occupy a department. For example, in the game, Xia Luo's Rose Guild occupied the finance department. All the funds for large-scale activities had to be approved by her. Nua Ayer's Rose Guild occupied the planning department, responsible for the planning and management of various activities. Originally, Luoya was still hesitating about which department to choose. He did not expect Paul to join him. The 2 could be said to hit it off, and Luoya could be completely relieved through this matter. To be honest, Luoya was very worried about Paul now. The main reason was that without the help of the girls, he was afraid that this little brother would meddle in other people's business and kill himself. If that happened, not only would Luoya's guilt explode, it would also have a great impact on the world. And if he guessed correctly, it should be a negative impact. Chapter 273. Luoya actually didn't know how many people there were in the Creation School, a special branch of the Summoning School. It was better to say that he was busy day and night, and even late at night, so he didn't pay attention to it. But he didn't pay attention to it, but others did. For example, Lillian, as a third-year student, she was very clear about the situation in the Creation School. Today was the first class, but it was basically impossible to avoid Luoya in the future combat practice, so the girl was somewhat resistant to this course. After entering the Summoning School classroom, the black-haired girl went directly to the seat reserved in advance by the Purple Rose school members. More than a dozen Austin nobles surrounded Lillian, so Luoya naturally couldn't get close. And considering the girl's attitude, he would just be asking for trouble if he went over. But what Luoya didn't expect was that he was also surrounded. As a first-year student who got the first place in the history of the entrance ceremony, Luoya was a student of the Creation School. Therefore, this place became a gathering place for people with Luoya as their goal. Sitting in the center of the last row, before he had time to react, there was already a lot of singing and dancing around him. Nice to meet you, Luoya. I am. Luoya, do you have time for lunch later? After becoming a ring bearer, you need people, right? I can help you. Thank you. But sorry, I don't have such plans for the time being. Surrounded by a group of girls, the black-haired boy showed an elegant aristocratic smile on his face, constantly declining the kindness of the nearby girls. On the surface, he was at ease, but in fact he was exhausted. Since a few years ago, Luoya almost didn't deal with girls at aristocratic banquets. The main reason was that Nua Iyer and Ai Lizzie were at the banquets held by the theocracy. The two of them fought fiercely, and other people couldn't get involved at all. In Rose, Xia Luo's family was the dominant one, so it was really a long time ago that he was surrounded by so many girls. Luoya couldn't cope with the excessive number of questions and invitations, which made him understand the importance of faction members for the first time. Sometimes, ring bearers really needed protection. For example, Lillian could attend classes, or do her own things under the protection of her faction members. Meanwhile, Luoya, who was all alone, could only personally deal with these suitors. And it wasn't just ordinary pursuers. There were people with bad intentions, scum girls who wanted to take advantage of him, and green tea girls who liked to seduce men to prove their charm. There were all kinds of people mixed in, making it hard to distinguish between good and bad. After such a torment, Luoya could be said to be physically and mentally exhausted by the time class was over. He was only saved when Nua Iyer came to find him. Miss Angel's pupils shrank when she saw the group of girls surrounding Luoya. The theocracy nobles around her were very self-aware. They didn't need to be ordered to directly swarm forward and use their bodies to block the crowd for Luoya. I say, it's about time for Blue Rose's faction to recruit people. If this goes on, you won't be able to attend classes. Indeed. My apologies, Nua Iyer. You've been a great help. The blonde princess glanced at the dissatisfied vixens and nodded slightly, not taking them seriously at all. As a matter of fact, this motley crew wasn't the reason why she came here. She was only here to see how Luoya was getting along with the other rows. The nearby students came and went. Soon, the black-haired girl walked out of the classroom accompanied by the crowd. Nua Iyer and the others naturally attracted Lillian's attention. Under the gaze of Lillian's purple pupils, Nua Iyer reached out and grabbed Luoya's hand as if declaring sovereignty, using practical actions to show that he was under her protection. But facing this behavior, Lillian didn't say anything. She simply swept a glance at the two of them and shifted her gaze away. Nua Iyer and Lillian were of different grades and didn't know each other, so they didn't intend to greet each other. The two groups brushed past each other. Lillian didn't look at them and seemed to be uninterested in them. Nua Iyer followed her all the way until she disappeared. Luoya, that woman didn't do anything to make things difficult for you, did she? No, not at all. Or rather, she gave him a lot of help. The black-haired young man answered with a guilty conscience. Upon hearing this, Nua Iyer heaved a sigh of relief, held his hand, and revealed a smile. That's good. Then, according to the agreement, you'll accompany me at noon today, right? The princess said. Her blue pupils squinted excitedly as if they were sparkling. Many of the nearby boys saw this and walked away with envious expressions. However, facing the familiar gaze of a predator, the young man's heart inexplicably skipped a beat, and he was instantly alerted. Lunch danger. In the busy streets at noon, Lillian Aikman returned to her residence surrounded by the nobles of Austin. The junior students had to rush to lunch due to schoolwork, but for the senior students who were relatively free and had no classes in the afternoon, it was a good choice to miss the peak of the crowd. As for Lillian, she didn't need to go to the high-class restaurant in the school because the imperial chef of the Austin royal family was in the building under her feet. Among the 3 princes and princesses of the Austin Empire who had the right to inherit, Lillian's identity was particularly noble. Her father was the emperor of the empire, and her mother was born in the Salin family, a duke family that had been passed down from the Second Era. They had been the ruling class since the human migration to the West 1,000 years ago. They were also one of the few great nobles that formed the new Austin Empire. Such an identity was basically the end of the line in the empire that believed in the pure blood theory. Naturally, she would receive preferential treatment. The imperial chef of the palace was just the tip of the iceberg. However, unlike usual when she ate alone, Lillian's exclusive building, the Linglong Pavilion, welcomed a rare guest today. Chapter 274. The moment Paul voiced his decision, he clearly felt Lillian's gaze tighten. The sudden sense of oppression made him straighten his back and wait to be reprimanded by his royal sister. However, to his surprise, after a long silence, Lillian did not say anything. The black-haired girl stared at the young man opposite her at this time. In fact, her heart was far from being as calm as she appeared on the surface. As a royal princess, Lillian, who was born in the palace, had never experienced much familial affection since she was a child, and she had never had the experience of getting along with relatives younger than her. In her impression, this was the first time a creature like her younger brother had appeared. She should have taken care of him as an elder, but she did not expect Paul to block this path from the very first step. It was fine not to join the Purple Roses faction. It was a wise choice to do so. Although Lillian could not shelter Paul in the name of the organization, it was not a big deal to occasionally help her younger brother, who had no affiliation. With her ability, she could do it. But once Paul joined another faction, the nature of this matter would be different. It was equivalent to Paul taking the initiative to give up Lillian's care and follow an outsider. This matter could cause serious consequences. No matter what, Paul's surname was Aikman. As a member of the royal family, even if he did not have the right to inherit, it was unacceptable for many people in the Austin Empire to submit to an outsider. Not to mention, Luoya was a noble of the theocracy. That person should have considered this matter. Even so, why did he still take Paul in? Is this your choice? Royal sister? I mean, did you take the initiative to ask for this? Yes. I took the initiative to look for Big Brother Luoya yesterday. We haven't seen each other since that incident at the beginning of the semester. I didn't expect him to really agree to take me in. Looking at the touched smile on Paul's face, Lillian frowned slightly. She could not understand Luoya's behavior more and more. But the girl hesitated for a moment, and did not say anything because she knew that she could not change Paul's decision now. If you've really decided to do this, it means that you're ready. Let's not talk about unaffiliated free people for the time being. Among other people's factions, even my security department can't provide you with any help. If this is a trap, you'll have to fight alone, and you'll definitely arouse the strong disgust of some of the nobles in the country. Father might have some ideas, and your environment might be even worse. The black-haired girl calmly talked about the difficulties that Paul might encounter in the future. Hearing this, Paul's face stiffened for a moment. He recalled what Luoya said when she showed him the cyan ring last night. After a moment of silence, he nodded. I believe in Big Brother Luoya. Compared to the goodwill of those fake nobles, I want friends who treat me with sincerity. His Majesty may hate me because of this, But I'm just an illegitimate child who doesn't have the right to inherit. I'm not interested in the throne either. Compared to that, I want a beautiful school life and work hard to become stronger to get closer to the goal in my heart. Paul clenched his fists as the image of the black-haired, golden-eyed young man emerged in his mind. Looking at him, Lillian couldn't help but widen her eyes slightly. Is that so? Lillian let out an undetectable sigh. She gazed at the young man and was filled with emotions. She also confirmed the fact that Paul was an anomaly in the cold-blooded Ackman family. Unlike his elder brothers who were passionate about pursuing power and status, even though Paul came from a humble background, he gave Lillian the feeling that he was living seriously. That was a more positive, free-flowing youth, and the pursuit of truth. It was a pure feeling without the smoke of conspiracy and the stench of rotten interests. It was also a way of life that Lillian envied. But it was a pity that Paul didn't choose to get close to Lillian. Otherwise, the girl felt that they might have been able to maintain a good relationship. Since you've made up your mind, I won't keep you any longer. But after all, we're relatives who have origin-substance resonance. If there's any critical situation, as a last resort, you can still look for me. Origin-substance resonance? I understand. Thank you for your kindness, royal sister. Although Paul was puzzled by the so-called origin-substance resonance, he still understood what Lillian was trying to say. The young man who received the promise hurriedly thanked her. The black-haired girl glanced at Paul and didn't find it strange. After all, Paul had just reached source rank level 5 not long ago. It hadn't been long since he obtained the origin substance, so it was normal that he didn't understand origin-substance resonance. After thanking her, Paul, who had finished explaining everything, felt much more relaxed. After finishing his dessert, he bid farewell and left. Walking out of the exquisite and elegant Linglong Pavilion, the young man was filled with emotions. Although royal sister Lillian doesn't like to talk and doesn't have much of an expression, she seems to be a good person. If only she could have a better relationship with big brother Luoya. Paul sighed at the huge difference between the two of them. At the same time, a question arose in his mind. What exactly is origin-substance resonance? There should be a feeling of resonance no matter how you think about it. My origin substance is fine every day. When did it ever resonate? Paul frowned in confusion. After thinking for a while, he realized that he had touched on a blind spot in his knowledge. He could only shake his head helplessly and throw this matter to the back of his mind. Forget it. When I have time, I'll ask big brother Luoya. The young man thought so and left the Black Rose faction's encampment. Luoya had many purposes for entering St. Freya Academy: learning knowledge, improving himself, making friends, and obtaining academic qualifications. On the surface, he was working hard in every aspect. As for the secret goals, there were even more, such as finding clues about Scholar, the series of events that Paul had caused, and Roy's mission that was basically impossible to complete. Chapter 275. In the entire kingdom of scholars, from old men in their 80s to children as young as 8 years old, everyone knew that the students of St. Freya Academy were either rich or respectable. After graduation, they would have a bright future ahead of them. In Leinster, where hormones were flourishing, the young girls of various academies were even more aware of this fact. But as everyone knew, St. Freya Academy was a closed school. It was known as a city within a city. There were many students, but they could not be found on the streets of Leinster. So what should one do? The easiest way was to go to the state-run Wisdom Library. This treasure trove of wisdom that was open to all humans had very relaxed conditions for Leinster students. Because of this, it became a gathering place for students from other schools. For some playboys, this was a place for romantic encounters, but for Luoya it was a little noisy. Strolling towards the paid personal reading room, Luoya began to rummage for his St. Freya Academy ID in his pocket. As a student of the school, he did not need to pay for his personal reading room immediately. Instead, he would receive a bill at the end of the semester. But as a ring-bearer, Luoya could use the public funds to pay for his reading room, so he did not even need to keep an account. All he needed to do was show his ID. Luoya queued up to the front desk. After showing his student ID and the ring of green rose, The staff immediately became more enthusiastic. They even pointed out the brightest rooms for Luoya. The black-haired boy thanked them politely and picked the one closest to him. It had to be said that ring-bearers were treated well in the school. Not only were they respected, but the access to the state-run wisdom library was also higher than that of ordinary students. This was a great help to Luoya, who only gained experience by reading historical documents. The personal reading room in the state-run wisdom library was not bad. Although it could not be compared to the Nua Ayer's personal reading room in the Holy City Royal Library, it still had a simple academic style. A table, a chair, a small bookshelf for books, a coat rack for clothes, a lamp, a white notebook, and a pen. These were all the items in the reading room of the National Wisdom Library. It could be said that it carried out pragmatism and was full of academic style. As a student, Luoya agreed with this. As a student, he should learn knowledge and temper his will, not indulge in luxury. The environment of the library in the holy capital was good, and Roha's identity was the young master of the Akate family, so there was nothing wrong with using the library. But as a student of the St. Freya College, Roha preferred to be simple. Sitting on the chair, Luoya began to study by himself. With no one to disturb him, the teenager's reading speed increased a lot. The ability brought by his bloodline allowed him to read the real part of a book without too much time, and extract the essence of a book in the shortest time possible. After 2 nights of dreams, Luoya could basically confirm that the location of his battle was near the academy. Then, after understanding the enemy in the dream, Luoya should also understand the battlefield of St. Freya Academy. As a new student, Luoya was not familiar with the various facilities of the academy. If he was surrounded by enemies and did not even know how to escape, this was undoubtedly very disadvantageous. Luoya had to attend classes every day and did not have much time to walk around the academy. So looking for the academy's architectural design, here seemed to be a good choice. Thinking of this, Luoya went to the library area, but not long after, he looked at the rows of bookshelves and felt troubled. The academy's architectural design, this kind of thing is usually not open to the public. Where can I find it? The latest version of St. Freya Academy's map is located in the library area 3, on the 12th bookshelf, requires a certain level of authority to borrow it. Is that so? Hearing the answer, Luoya turned around and thanked him, but there was no one behind him. This overly strange situation made the youth widen his eyes and look around, but there was only a forest of bookshelves nearby, and the surroundings were also silent. Where's the person? There was a female voice just now. Good afternoon, Your Excellency, are you looking for me? Behind the strange Luoya, the voice came again. Hearing this, the youth suddenly raised his head, only to find that the source of the voice was a shimmering crystal ball. What the hell is this? You are? Respected ring-bearer. Artificial elf Margaret is at your service. Artificial elf? What is that? Luoya widened his eyes and looked at the light above his head, puzzled. One must know that as a history enthusiast, Luoya was not an ignorant youth that could be found everywhere. After so many years of reading, he could be said to be knowledgeable, but even he had never heard of artificial elves. Shiya's elves had many legends, such as the origin of the soul, the first life form, and a mess of titles in the academic world, but without exception, they were all high and mighty, unknown to humans. The origin of the elves was not even known, and artificial creation was simply impossible. Besides, even if it was really created, it would be a big news that would shock the entire human world. How could Luoya not know? Moreover, he had never seen such a thing appear in Recorder's eye. It's impossible to artificially create elves, at least not now. What exactly are you? The overly unexpected situation made Luoya vigilant, narrowing his eyes and staring at the crystal ball above him as he questioned. Margaret was silent. The crystal ball shone, and the surroundings were silent. Under Luoya's sharp gaze, after a long time, the artificial elf finally gave another explanation. Sorry, your authority has not reached the level of unlocking. Please understand. Chapter 276. In the evening, the black-haired young man walked out of the library, rubbing his glabella and heading toward the teaching area. There were many blueprints of the state-run wisdom library, but they were all very professional designs. As a non-professional, Luoya felt deeply exhausted after studying them for an hour. But fortunately, his hard work paid off. After this inspection, Luoya figured out the structure of many buildings on campus. In the future, he didn't have to worry about running around like a headless fly in the dream world anymore. And after completing a part of the mission, it was time for him to face his strict teacher again. As usual, Luoya walked carefully in the cloak and gave the same command that left him speechless. He pushed open the door to classroom 14 of the first teaching area and gazed at the young lady standing on the podium. His heart couldn't help but skip a beat. She's wearing a purple dress today. At this thought, Luoya gazed at the young lady in the classic purple dress. His eyes couldn't help but follow the beautiful curves of Lillian's body. Today, the young lady was still dressed conservatively without revealing her lower body. Compared to before, her waist and chest remained the same, but more of her shoulders were exposed. Around her fair, slender neck was a small bow knot tied with a purple ribbon, making her appear elegant and quiet. Got to say, purple really suited Lillian. On one hand, it matched the young lady's pupils, and on the other hand, it matched her temperament. Mysterious, intelligent, and an ice-cold beauty whose thoughts couldn't be guessed. This was the impression that Lillian gave to him. But for some reason, Luoya felt like this beautiful senior was colder toward him today. After pondering for a while, Luoya guessed the reason and didn't say much. He sat down obediently and listened to the lesson. Looking at his behavior, Lillian didn't say anything and immediately started tutoring him. No matter what her attitude was, no matter if she was in a negative mood or not, there was no problem with Lillian's tutoring. Her tutoring was as precise and elegant as her swordsmanship. The most frightening thing was that she would always answer every question before Luoya even asked a question. In fact, she would even answer the question 1 second before Luoya asked a question. This made Luoya suspect that she had some sort of mind-reading ability. But it turned out that Luoya was overthinking things because Lillian's explanations were comprehensive. She wouldn't stop just because Luoya had mastered the part. The young man was helpless about this. But in the process of one-on-one tutoring, Luoya didn't dare to slack off in front of his senior no matter what. At the end of the day, this tutoring class was a free meal, and he had even used Chris's favor. If he didn't take it seriously, it would be impolite. Luoya was conscientious and meticulous in class. Perhaps Lillian was satisfied with his attitude, so halfway through the class, the two of them started practicing combat. Luoya couldn't learn how to control spell power, but it was different for spell power compression. It was first born out of the energy school, and mainly pursued the use of spell power. As for putting it into practice, it was fencing. Of course, this fencing wasn't really fencing. Both sides weren't using real swords. Instead, they were using spell power compressed by their own spell power. To put it bluntly, it was Luoya's hemp rope. The rules of the competition were simple. Both sides slashed at each other, and whichever side's sword broke would be the loser. Then a scene similar to the first lesson would take place. Crack! With a soft sound, Luoya's hemp rope was cut in half in the collision. The young man looked at the broken spell power in his hand and sighed before reforming it. Meanwhile, Lillian guided him calmly from the side. Didn't I say it before? It's useless to be rough. You need to improve your technique. You don't need to compress it after it's big. Instead, you need to change it from the start. What you're releasing now is like water. You need to make it thicker from the start. Only then will you succeed. Perhaps because Luoya's mistake was too obvious, Lillian gave a rare long speech. However, the black-haired young man wasn't enlightened at all. Instead, he had a strange expression on his face, especially when he saw the two of them in their current positions. Spell power fencing was basically done with one's hands. It felt a bit like fighting with chopsticks. That was why Lillian walked down from the podium and stood in front of Luoya. Now the young man's face was facing Lillian's slender belly. Luoya's spell started shaking around in the young man's head again, causing his face to turn redder and redder. For some reason, he felt a strange itch in his heart. For a moment, he didn't know whether to look up or down. What are you waiting for? Start over. An indifferent and cold voice sounded in the young man's ears, causing the feverish Luoya to come back to his senses. The young man looked up at Lillian and realized that his senior sister was waiting for him with a glow in her hand. No, I have to get my mindset right. What does her belly have to do with me? Clenching his teeth, Luoya began practicing again. With Lillian's guidance, Luoya's stick finally improved. After more than 10 times, Luoya finally withstood a blow. Looking at the red stick that withstood the blow, Luoya instantly became spirited. Senior sister. Mine. Crack. But unfortunately, before Luoya could raise his head to express his joy, Lillian swept her sword across and broke his waist. Luoya's smile froze on his face, and he couldn't continue his sentence. After blinking his eyes, he could only lower his head silently and continue gathering spell power. But perhaps Lillian realized that she had conveniently dampened Luoya's enthusiasm. After a slight pause, she stopped her movements, pondered for a moment, and said, just like that. Just like before. Continue. Chapter 277. In classroom 14 of the 1st District, Luoya maintained a calm expression and breathed a sigh of relief. On the other side, Lillian Archman was also a little relieved. The black-haired girl put the teaching utensils back in place, then tidied up her clothes and prepared to go out. However, before Luoya said goodbye to her, Lillian suddenly stopped as if she remembered something. Ha! What's wrong? The black-haired boy saw Her Royal Highness Empress, who stopped and turned around. He was worried again, fearing that the girl with great power would go back on her words. However, what he didn't expect was that Lillian didn't come to take back her decision about Paul. Instead, she came to deliver something. This is for you. Hey. The black-haired girl walked quickly to Luoya. Suddenly, she took something out of her pocket and put it on the table. Luoya looked at the table strangely. The next moment, his eyes widened and he fell into a daze. Under the illumination of the light, a pink furry and cute rabbit plushie was lying quietly on the table. Its eyes were made of small rubies. Its body was made of high-quality fabric, and its ears were stuffed with something that made them look plump and elastic. Senior, this is... Curse Vessel Communicator. I'll lend it to you temporarily. Hey. The black-haired girl looked at Luoya's eyes and explained in a flat tone. It's suspicious if you go out at night. I will tell you through this during the tutoring time in the future. You should know how to use it, right? Ugh, I know, but... The black-haired boy picked up the rabbit doll on the table sluggishly. His head had not recovered until now. Curse Vessel Communicator was a common means of communication within St. Freya Academy. It was sold in pairs. Generally speaking, as long as both parties with the communicator were near the central campus, then the words written by one party using the paper in the communicator would also appear on the paper of the other party. This small curse vessel, which was convenient to use in a certain area, was very popular in the academy. Luoya naturally heard about it. It was not surprising that Lillian used this to contact him, but why this shape? A pink fluffy doll was nothing for ordinary girls, but Lillian. Is this your inner style? Luoya looked up at the cold beauty in front of him, then looked down at the communicator with the girlish heart. His cheeks twitched for a moment. Lillian seemed to find something wrong with Luoya, and her voice suddenly became indifferent. Is there a problem? The cold whisper came into his ears. Luoya couldn't help but shiver. He knew that his performance was too obvious and irritating Lillian. At the critical moment, the boy picked up the rabbit doll on the table. When he looked up again, his eyes were shining. When he raised his head again, what a beautiful communicator. This logo is the coffee shop opened by the reclusive curse object master on the commercial street. In other words, this is the super rare limited edition doll curse vessel that can only be obtained by the first guest who enters the door on the day the curse vessel is completed every year. It's amazing. Senior, how did you get it? Luoya recalled the girl's anecdote that Xia Luo popularized. He rubbed the fluffy doll and asked with a smile. Hearing Luoya's words, Lillian blinked with some surprise. She didn't expect the boy to know so much. The atmosphere around her relaxed a lot, and the girl thought for a while and replied. It's not difficult. As long as you figure out the date of her purchase in advance, then observe her daily free time, and do some calculations, you can roughly lock the time range of the curse vessel's completion within a few days. You actually calculated to this extent for this thing? How much do you like it? Luoya complained wildly in his heart, and the smile on his face couldn't be maintained. He pinched the rabbit's elastic fluffy ears in his hand, and hurriedly thanked her. It's really beautiful. Thank you, Senior Lillian. I will keep it carefully. Is it? That's good. The black-haired girl said calmly, then turned and left the classroom. Luoya looked at the closed door for a long time, then he looked at the fluffy doll in his hand. Suddenly, he felt that he understood Lillian better. The thing she likes is actually so girly. This is not even the content in the game. But thinking about it, Lillian's dressing actually has some girly elements, but she is too cold, so it can't be shown at all. Why do I feel that she's quite cute? Thinking of Lillian calmly using the rabbit doll communicator, Luoya felt that the picture was inexplicably cute. It made his stereotypical impression of Lillian fade a lot. There was just a problem. This thing, do I have to carry it with me every day in the future? Chapter 278. A month later. In the bedroom of Tsang Hall, the black-haired boy on the bed opened his eyes with the sound of the alarm clock. It had been a month since the beginning of spring. The weather gradually warmed up, and the quilt on Luoya's bed became thinner. Amidst the ringing noise, the boy reached out and gently waved his hand, and the noisy alarm clock was turned off. The disturbing noise disappeared, but unlike before, Luoya didn't sit up today. Instead, he laid on the bed and looked at the ceiling to rest. In Shiya, the students also had a rest day. Today was a rest day, so although the alarm clock rang as usual, St. Freya Academy was different from the usual tranquility. But as the saying goes, everyone has their own fate. While others were resting, others were working overtime. Luoya's life could be said to be the leader of the overtime world. He was working overtime even in his dreams. Sighing softly, Luoya raised his hand and looked at the black rose ring that was still flickering with a faint fluorescent light. His face showed a gratified smile of an old father looking at his child. It's good to grow up again, but it's really tiring. The black-haired boy recalled the situation in the dream and sighed. In the past month, because of the busy work, Luoya wore the black rose ring and only slept 7 or 8 times. Every time, he fought with the priority of safety. Basically, he carried out a one-on-one kill on the black-armored soldiers. After many battles, Luoya found that the only ones who had the ability to unify the campus at night were the black-clothed clergy. Since Luoya appeared, every time they went out, they would bring more than 5 guards with them. And when they weren't there, the black-armored soldiers would gradually disperse over time. Holding his forehead and sighing, Luoya felt a headache because of the current chaotic situation. The only thing he could pray for was that he could quickly unlock the Black Rose ring, and obtain the second authority, and get some clues from Margaret. During this month, Luoya could be said to be extremely busy. Most of his thoughts were occupied by the faction and the consultation department. Fortunately, everything went smoothly. After Paul's hard work, Luoya's Rose faction had reached the scale of dozens of people in a month. Although the number of new AIR members was not much compared to Xia Luot, and most of them were still in the experimental stage, it was still a faction that was progressing rapidly from scratch. Today, the members of Luoya's faction were mainly local students of the country of scholars, and the children of aristocrats of small countries other than several major countries. They were all well-behaved after preliminary observation. After Luoya delegated power to the original protagonist group, Paul also successfully found one of them. Jarek Stevenson, gray hair, blue eyes, short height, relatively thin and handsome face. He was the son of the Marquis of Pender, the country of knights, and Paul's roommate. In the original recorder's eye, he was the good brother of the protagonist Paul, and a character who would be of great help to Paul in the future. The Stevenson family was a great aristocrat of Pender, the country of knights. It had a history of hundreds of years. Many of the family's martyrs had participated in the war against the aliens. It could be said that they had many famous generals. They belonged to a military family similar to Luoya's Akate family. Of course, in terms of size and influence, the Church of St. Maester was far superior to Pender. The Akate family's status as one of the 5 major aristocratic families was also far stronger than the Stevenson family. Therefore, although they were both sons of marquises, strictly speaking, Jarrick's status was far inferior to Luoya. Even so, he was still a famous aristocrat. So the question was, why did such a famous family's son, who normally lived in a single room, become Paul's roommate? The answer to this question puzzled Paul for a while until Jarrick came to see Luoya. In order to show his sincerity, he told him everything. To put it simply, this young master sneaked out because the Stevenson family did not support him to come to St. Freya Academy. Yes, this was the reason why Jarrick sneaked out. In fact, in the current student file, Jarrick was also using a fake identity. He was using the fake identity of Pender. On paper, he was the son of a businessman and had nothing to do with Pender. When he heard this, Paul was stunned. He looked at the thin man beside him. No matter what, he did not expect that the person who shared a room with him every day was the son of a marquis. At the same time, he was very puzzled that the Stevenson family did not support him to come to St. Freya Academy. In Paul's opinion, the opportunity to become a student of the academy was a dream of many people. But Luoya knew a thing or two about this kind of situation. In fact, the problem was not with the Stevenson family but with Pender. To put it bluntly, Pender was a more abstract country. A considerable number of their traditional aristocrats had the following thoughts. What? Curses? That's something only girls use. Real men should just go up and chop them. It's normal to chop them to death. If you can't chop them to death, it's because you're too weak. Oh, you can learn how to illuminate. That's right, this was the brain and muscle of Pender, the country of knights. It was also the reason why Pender, a big country, had the lowest percentage of students in St. Freya Academy. As a traditional family of knights, the Stevenson family was even more obsessed with the idea of breaking through everything with one force. Therefore, even if Jarrick's talent in physical arts and swordsmanship was far less than his talent in spellcasting, the Stevenson family still wanted him to go to St. Freya Academy in Pender, which was the most famous gathering place of Shia. Jarrick's situation was not an exception. In fact, there were many people like him in Pender. Most of them listened to the arrangements of their families, but a small number of them did not want to waste their talent, and would find ways to change their identity, and go to St. Freya Academy to study. The so-called industrial chain was created to meet this demand. As for young Master Jarrick's situation, it was actually because he did not bring enough money when he ran out. After a lot of trouble, he did not have much spare money when he arrived in the country of scholars, so he could only live in the cheapest 2-person dormitory. After listening to the gray-haired youth's narration, Paul completely understood the situation of his roommate. He lamented that the Marquis had condescended to his status. Luoya and Jarrick's eyebrows twitched at the same time. Have you forgotten that you're a prince? Luoya thought so in his heart, but he did not refute it. Instead, he carefully thought about the situation of Jarrick, the new member. He, who knew part of the plot of Recorder's Eye, actually knew that the reason why the Marquis' son from Pender came to study here was actually only half of the story. If he remembered correctly, the biggest reason why he chose St. Freya Academy instead of St. Freya Academy was to avoid his fiancée, a daughter of the Duke of Pender named Brittany. Unfortunately, his plan was destined to end in failure, because Brittany was also a member of the protagonist group. If Luoya guessed correctly, she should already be on her way here. Brittany's arrival would cause a commotion, but in the end, she would choose to stay in St. Freya Academy and join the consultation department. In other words, Luoya basically obtained 2 capable people at once, and both of them were the sons of powerful nobles in Pender, the country of knights. After confirming that the faction cadres had a living allowance and lived in Song Hall for free, Jarrick officially applied to join. After Luoya approved, in order to frustrate his arrogance, he had a battle with him in the arena. Chapter 279. It was a blood-red letter. If it was in his previous life, Luoya might not be surprised. After all, many love letters on Valentine's Day were of this color, which represented sincerity. But in Shia, this color represented an ominous one. After all, people in modern society were used to peace and rarely saw blood, so they were not very sensitive to this color. But in the public security situation, which was far worse than Shia in his previous life, this color would arouse people's vigilance, especially for transcendence. This color of the envelope was an obvious warning. When he found this letter in the mailbox early in the morning, Jellic originally thought it was a letter to cause trouble. After all, because of his roommate Paul, there were always some scoundrels who did not dare to show up at night, who would send all kinds of insulting letters to the mailbox of the consultation department. He was very angry about this, but there was nothing he could do. But adhering to the strict style of a military family, Jellic would still take a look at the content even if he was annoyed. But what he didn't expect was that he saw the problem today. This was a letter of entrustment, and it was very long. There were 3 pieces of letter paper, and it could be seen that it was a very serious request. Judging from the handwriting, it was likely to be written by a girl, but the content inside was too strange. The most important thing was that there was no signature. It should be because of the content, so the client used this color of the envelope to attract our attention. But the content inside is really too involved. Jellic handed the letter to Luoya with both hands with a heavy expression, and explained the reason why he took an hour to rush back from the central campus in the morning. After receiving the letter, Luoya did not read it directly, but called a servant to add a chair. "Sit, eat something first." "Ah, thank you, Minister." Feeling Luoya's attention, Jellic smiled and sighed for the other party's thoughtfulness. As a student organization, the consultation department naturally couldn't start its business so early. In fact, Jellic didn't have time to move to Pale Hall, and he had the habit of doing morning exercises. Today, when he was running, he found this letter on the way through the mailbox. After noticing that there was a problem, he took the first carriage to Pale Hall, so he definitely didn't eat breakfast. Gerlach was so hungry that he stuffed food into his mouth. Paul was preparing for the meal. Luoya stroked the blood-red envelope for a moment, opened the letter, took out the letter and read it. The content of the entire letter was very complicated, but in general, it was a letter asking for help. The content was to ask the consulting department to help find a senior named Shirley Lawrence who might be on campus. After reading the entire letter, Luoya handed the letter to Paul and leaned back in his chair with his eyes closed. Who would have thought that the first incident they encountered would be this? The black-haired youth sighed in his heart, his expression slightly gloomy. The blood envelope incident, this was what Luoya called it. It was the first major incident in the academy in the recorder's eye that the youth played in his previous life. It was also an incident that changed the style of the entire story, making people reevaluate the seemingly perfect academy and the world. Normally, this incident should only appear after a few small incidents, but perhaps because Luoya changed something, the few small incidents that were used as foreshadowing didn't appear, causing the consultation department to be idle for half a month. But he never expected that as a result, Luoya and the others would have to face the extremely nasty blood envelope incident when they started work for the first time. The cause of the incident was the disappearance of Shirley Lawrence, a graduate of the academy this spring. Every year, St. Freya Academy's opening season was in early spring, but in fact, the graduation season was also in early spring. It was a model of retiring the old and welcoming the new. As graduates, Shirley and the others had already graduated for 3 months, so naturally, they weren't counted as students. Shirley was born in a small country near the Austin Empire, the Laurent Kingdom. Her family wasn't nobles but merchants. She was the second daughter in the family, and had an elder brother who inherited the family business, as well as a few younger sisters. Naturally, she didn't have the right to inherit the family business. For graduates of St. Freya Academy who had no family business to inherit, the best place to go was to find a job in Leinster. After all, compared to other places, Leinster not only had concentrated resources, but also had the highest recognition of St. Freya Academy's academic qualifications. As long as they could develop well here, they might even be happier than their brothers who ran the family business back home. As the second daughter of the family, Shirley naturally had the same thoughts after graduation, so she didn't go home immediately. Instead, she looked for a job in Leinster. But she didn't expect the unexpected. Shirley's elder brother and sisters were unfortunately caught in a flash flood when they were traveling, and they died while she was staying in Leinster. Her parents, in their grief, immediately wrote to Shirley to inform her of the incident and asked her to go home. Without a doubt, the Lawrence family, who only had one daughter and a family business, could only take in a son-in-law. Shirley went from being one of the many children to being the only child. Although it was a little heartless, from a personal point of view, Shirley's future life became better after this tragedy. However, something strange happened next. Shirley's parents didn't receive their daughter's return in a hurry. Instead, they received a reply letter. The content of the letter was that Shirley had found a job in Leinster, met a boyfriend, and wanted to start a new life. She thanked her parents in the letter and said that she didn't want to go home for the time being. At first, Shirley's parents thought that the letter was sent by their daughter before she learned of her elder brother's death, so they didn't pay much attention to it. But as time passed, Shirley didn't return. The Lawrence couple, who only had one child at home, thought that their daughter couldn't bear to part with her boyfriend, so they traveled a long distance to Leinster to pick her up, only to find that their daughter had already gone missing. More importantly, according to the receipt records of the Leinster post office, Shirley had actually received a letter from her parents. In other words, she already knew that her other children had died. The letter sent back to her hometown was sent a few days after she received it. It wasn't handled personally, but sent from a public mailbox to the post office. Then here came the question. Would a person who knew that all her siblings had died in an accident happily write that she had a new boyfriend and didn't want to go home? Would she give up her right to inherit her family's fortune for a new job? Obviously, this was impossible. Therefore, the Lawrence couple thought that their daughter had been kidnapped and immediately chose to report the case. However, Shirley stayed alone after graduation and didn't have any social connections. The Leinster police didn't find any clues after a round of investigation, so the matter was left unsettled. Although the police gave up, the Lawrence couple didn't. After a round of investigation, they received news that someone had seen Shirley near St. Freya Academy during the few days she went missing. Therefore, they approached the academy, hoping to help with the investigation. However, the relevant personnel of St. Freya Academy were not interested in this matter. After all, Shirley had already graduated. Strictly speaking, she was an off-campus employee. Furthermore, there was no evidence that she had once appeared on campus. In the eyes of the school, this matter was simply caused by the Lawrence couple, who couldn't find their daughter. After a symbolic notice, they sent them away. The Lawrence family was only a business family in a small country. Naturally, they couldn't put pressure on a colossus like St. Freya Academy. However, what they didn't know was that a third-year student who had been taken care of by Shirley had started an investigation after learning about this matter. This was also the origin of this letter. The content of this letter is really complicated. At the dining table, Paul frowned after reading the letter. He could clearly feel that this request was different from the rest. Usually, the requests that the consulting department received were at most about the difficulties that the students encountered in their lives. However, the content of this request was far from trivial. It actually involved a missing person case, and even carried a hint of danger. If this letter was true, then accepting this request was equivalent to the consulting department participating in the investigation of Shirley's missing person case. Once they found clues, it was likely to involve a crime, and the impact would be huge. This was also why Jellic had hurriedly come to Luoya after reading the letter. However, if they didn't accept this request, once Shirley was really still on campus and something happened to her, Paul and the others would inevitably blame themselves. Chapter 280. The blood envelope incident was an extremely vile incident, mainly because of its ending and the feeling it gave people. In the game Recorder's Eye in Luoya's previous life, the blood envelope incident was also taken seriously by Paul and others. After some discussion, they decided to use the stupidest method, which was to use the portrait to find the person. However, this person was not a student, but a coachman in the transportation network of St. Freya Academy. Compared with students who attended classes every day, coachmen were more likely to see people outside the school. In the end, it turned out that some of the coachmen had seen a woman who looked like Shirley, but because the power that the consultation department could mobilize was too small, Paul and others made slow progress. It was only a few days later when they learned the news. Next, Paul and others followed the coachman's instructions to a mountainous area in the academy. During the search, they found the Book of Truth badge of St. Freya Academy with Shirley's name on the back in the bird's nest. After finding this thing, everyone realized that something might have happened to Shirley. So after some hesitation, Paul went to see Lillian. A lost school badge was obviously insufficient as evidence that the owner was kidnapped. Paul could not use it as a reason to persuade the academy to take measures, but Lillian's security department was an exception. The special operations team of the security department was actually Lillian's personal guard. The members were generally third year, and all of them had the strength of source rank 4. They were the real elites who had followed Lillian out for experience. There was no problem in loyalty. They were the team that she cultivated for the future, and the strongest armed force in the entire St. Freya Academy. Paul successfully convinced the other party with his relationship with Lillian. Lillian immediately dispatched the security department to conduct a search, and the blood envelope incident was completely exposed to the world. According to the final investigation results, the blood envelope incident was actually a cult murder that had lasted for many years. The culprit was a faculty member in the academy and more than a dozen cultists hiding in the wine cellar in the mountain. This faculty member used his position to check the student information, and specifically selected non-aristocratic families like Shirley, who had many siblings, stayed alone in Leinster after graduation, and had no local social connections. He kidnapped and killed them to provide human experiment materials for the cult. In a few years, more than a dozen graduates had been killed. That's right. Senior Shirley, whom Paul and the others had been searching for, was no longer around from the very beginning. Later, they found the underground cellar of the cult's human experiments. There were no scenes of that place in the game. There was only one word to describe it: hell on earth. This incident had a great impact on a series of people, including Paul and Lillian. However, this was not all. The most infuriating and unacceptable thing for Luoya was the outcome of this incident. The sender of the bloody envelope was dead. A few days after the letter was sent, the only person who cared about the Lawrence couple, who had lost all their children, was killed. In fact, she had already been targeted in the process of running, and died in the last darkness before the light. On the other hand, her murderer, the clergyman, was alarmed by Paul and the others' vigorous search and successfully escaped from the law with the cultists. The blood envelope incident was a failure. The final outcome was the death of the searcher, the death of the sender, and the escape of the cultists. Justice and justice were not upheld, and the sinners were not judged and punished. This overly real and abominable result dealt a heavy blow to a series of people, including Paul, making him fully aware of his own shortcomings. However, a game was a game. In reality, Luoya could not swallow this **T no matter what. It was purely a joke to let the heinous cultists go unpunished. Luoya had been taken care of by the cultists since he was young, and had even been assassinated. He had a huge grudge against this group of bastards. Those who should live would live, and those who should die would die. This was Luoya's goal, and his priority was the first. Save people first, then kill people. So after receiving the bloody envelope, Luoya, who decided to accept the commission, did not take the path of the original work. Instead, he immediately began to look for the sender of the bloody envelope, hoping to save the only person who still had hope in this incident. However, there was a big problem in this matter. Luoya did not know the identity of the sender. It was not that Luoya's memory was bad, but in the recorder's eye, this paragraph was a narration describing the outcome of the incident that Paul heard. The name and appearance of the sender did not appear in it. The picture was Paul's memory. It was the beginning of the incident, and it was also the last bloody envelope of the sender's life. The lack of this information made Luoya's progress very difficult. The main reason was that the letter appeared late at night. It was basically certain that no one in the consultation department had seen the sender, and it was probably too late to find the possible witnesses. After understanding that there were no direct clues, Luoya also thought about whether Margaret of the School of Management would be monitored. but he shook his head when he thought of the building of the consultation department. The place where Margaret existed must have a crystal ball. This thing existed in all major teaching facilities, but there was no such thing in the consultation department building on the edge of the central campus. There was no such thing in the entire student group activity area nearby. After all, Margaret was responsible for managing the college facilities, not the students. It seemed that the only clue was this letter. If he couldn't find it, he could only launch a large-scale search. Luoya at the dining table thought so. He opened his eyes and studied it with the other two people. Can you roughly deduce the sender based on this letter? After hearing that Luoya wanted to find the sender, Paul had no doubts and decisively supported him. After all, the consultation department was now the front desk of the Blue Rose faction. If they were mobilized on a large scale because of a fictional matter, they would undoubtedly be treated as a joke. Therefore, it was natural to find the sender first to confirm the authenticity of the letter before acting. Regardless of the reason, the three people had the same goal. Under the observation of Luoya and others, the sender's identity was indeed revealed. This girl should be from Austin. Hey, brother Luoya, how did you know? The sentence. In Paul's surprised gaze, the black-haired boy narrowed his golden eyes and pointed to a sentence in the letter. Chapter 281. An hour later, on the outskirts of the school's central campus, the butterfly dance pavilion. Among the butterflies dancing in the flowers, red roses were blooming everywhere. A black-haired youth leaned on his cane and admired the beautiful scenery nearby, praising Xia Luo's foresight in choosing a place to stay. The butterfly dance pavilion, one of the famous attractions of St. Freya Academy, was located less than an hour's walk from the school's central campus. It had always been popular among the girls, but among the generations of ring-bearers, there were very few who chose it as their personal building. Because unlike Luoya's Ashen Hall, this building's annual maintenance cost was astonishingly high. The reason why the butterflies in the butterfly dance pavilion lived so well was because there were many pocket-sized butterfly houses in the building, and the entire garden had a temperature control barrier. The maintenance cost of these facilities not only consumed the school's allocated funds, but also required the ring-bearers to fork out a large sum of money to maintain. One of the greatest benefits of the ring-bearers was having their own personal building and training ground, and they could use the school's funds for free. But this butterfly dance pavilion not only did not save money, but also made people pay for it. This kind of situation was naturally unacceptable to most people, but Xia Luo was an exception. When she heard that this butterfly dance pavilion actually had a DVD of the Austin Empire's Room and Forest, Xia Luo decisively chose it as her personal building. The school's suggestions were all rejected, and the school could do nothing about this young lady's willful behavior. Who told her to give so much? So this building, which was originally not reserved, was allocated to the young lady of the school's biggest financial backer, the Sorofia family. The renovation process took a month, and the entire Wild Rose faction was broken up in this month. Until now, they had not moved yet, so it was quite secluded. Luoya smelled the fragrance nearby, and turned his head to observe the butterflies that were motionless on his shoulder. Behind him, the reddish-brown-haired girl held a blood-red envelope in her hand, and carefully observed it. Dear, is this the only letter? Seeing that Xia Luo seemed to be in a difficult situation, Luoya turned around and asked. The reddish-brown-haired girl thought for a moment and nodded lightly. Yep. Although I don't have a name or specific information, she used a spell, so the specific divination conditions are valid. However, the more vague the conditions are, the more vague the results will be. So, you need to be mentally prepared. It doesn't matter. Just give me a general range. Luoya said as she spread out the map of St. Freya Academy on the table. The reddish-brown-haired girl nodded, and took out an Austin Empire gold coin, and walked to the table. Using gold coins from the Austin Empire from hundreds of years ago can probably increase the accuracy. The rest will depend on the traces of the spell she left behind. As Xia Luo spoke, a strong wave of curse power began to spread from her body to the surroundings. Her ancient bloodline boiled under the influence of the young girl. A starry sky appeared behind Xia Luot, and an ancient god shadow protected her under its body. It held a scepter in one hand and a scale in the other. It was the arbiter of fate. Ding! At this moment, light gathered in Xia Luot's hand. With a flick of her finger, a dark golden coin was thrown into the air. After a long flip, it landed on the table where the map was placed. After bouncing for a long time, the coin was deducted, and the final result of the divination was revealed. This places, the reddish-brown-haired girl's spell power slowly retracted, and the golden divine elephant also disappeared. Xia Luo walked to the side of the map and looked carefully. She found that the coin was located in a dormitory area near the central campus. This is the third dormitory area. The buildings are relatively new and close to the commercial street. It's a single-room dormitory, and the accommodation fee is more expensive than the first dormitory area. Generally, it's for the wealthier nobles, and most of them are girls. The black-haired boy recalled the map of the academy and the information he collected in the past month. He gently picked up the coin on the table and revealed several buildings in the southwest corner of the third dormitory area. His heart that had been hanging in the air finally relaxed a little. Dear, is this okay? If it's in the dormitory, the flow of people. No, it's enough. Because the third dormitory area was relatively high-end, the buildings only had 5 floors, and each floor had 2 residents. In other words, each building had only 10 people, and there were about 100 students in the southwest corner. Among these 100 students, it was impossible to find a girl who was born in the Austin Empire, who was good at the School of Transformation, and who was in contact with Senior Shirley. As for the specific investigation, it was actually a small problem, because Luoya was not alone now. The entire consultation department, as well as the Green Rose faction behind her, would take action. Save the sender and bring the villain to justice. This time it must be. Luoya tapped her fingers on the table and made up her mind. In the evening, Luoya walked alone in the shadows of the dusk, looking at the road ahead silently. After Xia Luo divined the approximate living area of the sender this afternoon, the members of the Green Rose faction, which Luoya belonged to, began to secretly investigate the residents in this area using various relationships and reasons. So far, half of the people had been investigated. Although there were no results for the time being, it was estimated that they would be able to lock onto the target tomorrow. According to the situation of the original work, the sender was killed by the teacher a few days after the letter was sent. In general, there was still enough time left for the consultation department, so Luoya was not too anxious. Instead, he was steady in his anxiety. After handing these matters over to Paul and the others, he did not intervene. He believed that Paul, as the protagonist of the original work, had the ability to handle it well. As for Luoya himself, he began to weave a web. Although the mastermind of the series of serial murders of graduates was the teacher, the purpose of the blood envelope incident was to provide the evil cult with human experiment materials. The real root of the evil was the cult. If he did not eradicate it, how could he face the students who were tragically murdered? At least, Luoya would never be satisfied. Chapter 282. In the Linglong Pavilion, which was famous for its exquisite interior decorations, a black-haired young man and a young lady sat opposite each other in the reception room. The atmosphere between them was rather solemn. Just half an hour ago, Luoya visited Lillian alone and explained what he knew about the situation. That's right. Luoya didn't go to the bird's nest in the forest to search for Senior Shirley's badge like Paul did in the original work. He came to the Linglong Pavilion without any evidence and directly laid his cards on the table with Lillian. One of the reasons why Luoya did this was that he didn't want to waste time and alert the enemy. Another reason was that he knew his advantages. People of different identities would have different weight when they said the same thing. Although this sentence was somewhat suspicious, it was the truth to a certain extent. Luoya was different from Paul in the original work. He wasn't an illegitimate child of the Austin Empire who was ostracized. Instead, he was one of the 6 ring-bearers who had the highest decision-making power in St. Freya Academy. The consultation department was no longer a small fry department, but a powerful department supported by the members of the Blue Rose faction. As long as it came from Luoya's mouth, it carried considerable weight even if there was no evidence. And the relationship between Luoya and Lillian was no longer one of Paul's request for help in the original work. Instead, it was a collaboration. Luoya's consultation department would provide specific information on the possible hiding spots of the cultists and provide some support. The Nazis' Special Operations Team would be the main force in the encirclement and suppression operation. This was the cooperation plan that Luoya proposed. Originally, dealing with cultists should be the specialty of the Saint Maester theocracy, but due to the fact that most of the new AIR students were in their first years, most of them were still at level 5 of the source rank, which was a whole level lower than Lillian's Nazi elites. This difference in combat strength made Luoya decide to give up. The reason was that this time, Luoya was pursuing a complete victory. That was his goal from the start. On the other hand, this matter was also within the Nazis' responsibility. They received a lot of resources from the academy, so it was their duty to ensure public safety. Luoya thought as she held the teacup, silently waiting for the girl's decision. After a detailed consideration, the black-haired girl finally nodded slowly. I understand. I will personally lead a team to the vicinity of Foster Station and launch a quick attack on the cultists' hiding spot. I see. I didn't expect senior sister to believe me so quickly. Luoya, who was prepared to waste his breath, was interrupted by Lillian. He couldn't help but turn to her in surprise. Upon hearing his question, Lillian nodded calmly. Although there is no evidence, I don't think you would lie about such a serious matter. Her Royal Highness calmly stated the reason for her trust in him, and Luoya couldn't help but smile. However, what Luoya didn't know was that along with his brilliant smile, Lillian's body couldn't help but pause for a moment. Her purple eyes that sparkled with wisdom stayed on his body for a long time before she lowered her gaze. It was this feeling again. The black-haired girl picked up the teacup and sniffed the steaming aroma. Her fingers gently slid along the edge of the teacup, and she couldn't help but sigh inwardly. I don't know what's wrong with me recently. In the past month, Lillian and Luoya spent a lot of time together. They attended classes together during the day and had to make up lessons at night. Through this constant contact, especially the practice of the spell compression class, Lillian naturally had a certain degree of understanding of Luoya. He was serious in his studies, tenacious in the face of difficulties, and unwilling to admit defeat. However, his personality wasn't too strong and was more of a gentle type. But just like the murderous aura in the beginning, Lillian also discovered some peculiarities about this young man. For example, Luoya had a lot of troubles in his heart that didn't match his age. The so-called troubles in one's heart were the product of worry, fear, vexation, and other emotions piled up together. Its creation was inevitably accompanied by enormous pressure. In other words, Luoya lived in a high-pressure environment almost all year round. Before coming into contact with Luoya, Lillian couldn't imagine this at all because Luoya had almost no external reaction to this pressure. He was probably used to it. Perhaps the people around him, and even Luoya himself didn't realize it. But in the process of interacting with his spells, Lillian inexplicably felt like she could read him. If Luoya was a book, then Lillian's tutoring was like accidentally flipping open the cover of the book. The interaction of spells was like reading time. Although it wasn't long every day, it constantly deepened Lillian's understanding of Luoya. More importantly, Lillian's state of mind gradually changed. Lillian had a strange emotion that she didn't know where it came from. It was a wonderful emotion mixed with heartache and pity. This emotion made the usually cold Lillian think of some inexplicable things when teaching Luoya. Was it too harsh to say that? Considering his enthusiasm, it was fine to go easy on him a little. Such thoughts that had never crossed Lillian's mind when she was tutoring Luoya in the past flashed through Lillian's mind. Lillian liked how Luoya would smile brightly whenever he improved or when he heard her ambiguous words of praise. She couldn't help but stare at Luoya for a while every time. Fortunately, Luoya was quite slow in this aspect and didn't pay attention to it. On the other hand, Lillian hated how disappointed he was. Every time she saw him, she would feel as if something was pressing down on her heart. she would subconsciously tone down some of her harsh words. This time, Luoya came to visit her alone. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to describe what he said as shocking. But even so, Lillian still believed him after analyzing the situation. It could be said that this was inseparable from the 1 month they spent together. You said before that the consultation department has identified 2 suspicious locations. In that case, my **** operation team will also be split into 2. We will each lead a team. That way it will be safer. Lillian took a sip of tea as she sensed the subtle emotions in her heart. But to her surprise, Luoya actually hesitated after hearing her words. Then he said something that Lillian couldn't help but frown slightly. "Senior sister, I have some other ideas about this." The black-haired young man thought for a while and told her his battle plan. Chapter 283. Murti, a third-year girl. She wasn't tall, had a slightly thin figure, and had black hair and blue eyes. Her appearance was typical of the Austin Empire. St. Freya Academy was an academy where more than half of the nobles in Xia gathered. Although the Sani family had some assets, the identity of a viscount's daughter wasn't that noble. In addition, Murti's results in actual combat were mediocre. Therefore, even though she was a third-year Austin, she didn't join Lillian's Purple Rose faction. She met Shirley in a small musical instrument club. The 2 of them were juniors and had performed together at the Academy's anniversary last year. It could be confirmed that they had a deep friendship. After reading the entire report, the black-haired young man at the end of the long table crossed his arms and pondered. On both sides, Paul and Gerlach, who had heard Luoya's summary of the incident, also had heavy expressions, waiting for the next instructions. They had to admit that the current situation had completely exceeded their expectations of this strange department. Originally, Paul only wanted to set up an organization to help students in trouble, just like how Luoya had helped him. The worst-case scenario was to prevent school violence. But now they were unexpectedly involved in such a terrifying incident. That's right, this blood envelope incident was a cult incident that involved dozens of murders. It was a major case in any country's capital. What was even more terrifying was that this incident was like all other cult incidents. Only a small number of people could fully believe it. The teaching staff couldn't be trusted, the coachmen couldn't be trusted, and the majority of the students couldn't be trusted. They could only rely on some members of the 2 factions. The third-year students who had experienced experience were still fine, but for the first-year students who had just entered the academy, this test paper was seriously out of their scope. In the quiet conference room, Paul repeated his deep breaths. His palms were sweating. In his half-year life as a prince and more than 10 years of farming life, he had never seen such a huge evil act. Gerlach, who was sitting opposite him, also had an ugly expression. The reason why the 2 of them were able to remain calm was largely because of the black-haired young man in front of them. After discovering their situation, Luoya opened her golden eyes and calmly persuaded them. Remember, don't panic when you encounter something big. It's useless to panic. Looking at the immature Paul in front of him, Luoya understood in his heart, but he also knew that this was something he had to go through. A truly strong person isn't someone who doesn't know fear, but someone who can overcome fear. A truly noble person isn't someone who doesn't know evil, but someone who can resist evil. Paul can become that kind of person, but it still takes time and a little help from Luoya occasionally. This raid on the evil cult gathering point is a joint operation between our 2 factions. Although Blue Hall's strength isn't enough, we still need to send some people. That is, the 2 of you and the elites who have been in the source class for more than a year. To all of you, my only request is for you to be safe. How many of you go must return? Don't fight with Purple Rose for credit. We have worked so hard for so long. Our only goal is to see justice be served. Nothing else is important. In terms of the combat power of the team, your level has already far surpassed that of an ordinary judgment team of the Holy See. The only flaw is that you are not mentally prepared. We can't make up for this, so we might as well not make up for it. I'll just talk about my personal experience instead. Luoya stared at Paul and the others in front of him and said concisely, "Kill him, Minister." Remember, I don't care about the difference in strength. When you see the evil cult members, kill them. I don't need the evil cult captives. What I need is for you to come back alive. If anything happens, I will bear the responsibility. Brother Luoya. Hearing the young man's words, Paul and Gerlach understood the style of this operation. They were moved. Luoya smiled. It's good that you understand the focus of the operation. I can't care about the rest. After all, I have to carry out my own mission next. The black-haired young man said and silently picked up the information on the table. Sorry, we don't have any news about Shirley here. She hasn't been here since graduation. Oh, I see. Thank you, sorry to bother you. In the musical instrument store on the commercial street, a long-haired and artistic girl politely thanked the store manager after listening to his words. She turned her head and left with some disappointment. On the morning of the rest day, the commercial street was bustling with people. The dating couples were laughing and chatting happily. However, Melty, who was walking on the street, felt like she was in two different worlds. More than a week ago, Murdy met the parents of her former good friend, Senior Shirley, who had taken care of her. When they found out that Shirley was suspected to have gone missing in the academy, everyone else thought that it was the nonsense of an old couple who had lost all their children. Only Murdy was shocked and realized that something wasn't right. This was naturally not because the girl had any special ability. In fact, the reason why Melty was sure that Shirley was missing on campus was that she had a clue that others didn't know. That was the Curse Vessel Communicator. Curse Vessel Communicators were generally sold in pairs, and many of them were cute dolls. It was common for girls to give each other gifts to show their friendship. Shirley once received a communicator from Melty as a gift. It was a rather cute cat-style communicator. When the two parties were in the communication range, the doll's eyes would light up, and it would meow when it received the communication. Melty clearly remembered that one night after the start of the new semester, the cat's eye stone did light up for a short period of time. That time was around Shirley's disappearance. The girl was sure that Senior Shirley had indeed come to the college. However, there was no conclusive evidence. It was impossible to convince anyone with just one side of the story. For the friendship in her heart, for the Lawrence couple who lost their child, the righteous Melty launched an investigation alone. It had been more than a week so far, but everything was not as she wished. Chapter 284. St. Freya Academy's monthly break was a total of 5 days. This was a great thing for Luoya, because no matter how the students of the security department and the consultation department tried to hide it, their absence during classes couldn't be covered up. That's right. Lillian's special operations team, Paul, and the others had secretly hidden in the forest near Forster Station. Due to the distance and time constraints, they couldn't attend classes and carry out missions at the same time. Although the absence of a few people in a large class with hundreds of people wouldn't be noticed, the absence of teachers like Lillian and Luoya was still very obvious. Although Luoya felt that the possibility of there being cultists among the students was relatively low, he still couldn't completely rule out this possibility. Once the matter was exposed, this operation would become a wasted effort. The only reward was probably to protect the sender. Therefore, the best time to act was before the end of the holiday. According to Luoya's memories, the enemy did indeed make a move during this period. If he guessed correctly, it should be at the end of the holiday, right before everyone was busy preparing for classes. And the location of the crime was in this room. In the dormitory building, the black-haired young man calmly informed the black-haired girl in front of him of his investigation results. He didn't hide anything from her. Before this, he had considered telling her part of the truth to calm her emotions, but after thinking about it, he dismissed the idea. What Luoya needed the most now was for Melty to have a clear understanding of her situation. Only then could he prevent her from doing some impulsive actions that would give others an opportunity to take advantage of her. But inevitably, when she heard that Shirley was targeted by the cultists and that her fate was unknown, the girl couldn't help but cry uncontrollably. "I'm sorry, sir. I can't help it," Melty said as her tears fell uncontrollably. Luoya looked at the girl and didn't say anything. He knew that Melty needed to be released now. The grief of her good friend's calamity and the fear of being targeted by the cultists were too heavy for a young girl. But it was also something she couldn't escape from. But unlike in the game, Luoya was by her side now. Miss Melty, I understand the pain and fear in your heart, but I have to tell you that you're not alone now. Your actions aren't meaningless. The black-haired youth looked at the crying girl and did not say anything to comfort her. Instead, he told her the truth in the most gentle tone. Although I'm the only one here, there are hundreds of people who are supporting this operation and working hard behind the scenes, including our 2 teams who are about to clash head-on with the cult. I know your fear, but please trust us. Trust our determination to protect you and defend justice against evil. Senior Shirley's tragedy is heart-wrenching, but what you've done isn't in vain. Because of your kindness and integrity, we've learned of the numerous crimes that the enemy has hidden in the darkness. Countless people will be saved because of this, and the deceased will also be able to rest in peace. Miss Melty, you can be proud of yourself. At least, you didn't disappoint the name of St. Freya Academy's student. In this incident, you've done well enough. Under the youth's gentle praise, the girl finally burst into tears. The tiredness of the past few days also surged up. After a long time, Melty's crying gradually subsided. Only then did Luoya speak of his purpose, which was to wait here for the main culprit and protect her. Without a doubt, Luoya's purpose was risky. Melty could have refused, but after hearing that this was the only way to bring the main culprit to justice, the girl decisively agreed. After a conversation, the exhausted girl returned to her bedroom to rest. Listening to Melty's steady breathing next door, Luoya reached into his pocket and took out a delicate little lock. Macaron's hideout. The great curse maker, Macaron, created a hideout to escape the enemy's pursuit. When he closes the lock disguised as an accessory, no one can find him again. As for using it to observe the ladies taking a bath in his later years, that's another matter. Equipment effect. Inject curse power, close the lock, and the body will be locked in a small fault space. Restriction condition. No large-scale movement. No curse power fluctuation in the space. Price. 200,000 points. That's right, this was the first time Luoya bought the accessory-like lock at its original price since he owned the system. This was the reason why Luoya was confident that he could protect Melty without alerting the enemy. Macaron's hideout was a rare space curse item. It could form a small fault in the space within a few meters of Luoya, making him unable to observe from here. However, due to the instability of the space, once Luoya ran out of the range or used a curse, the space would crack and disappear. This property made Macaron's hideout difficult to use for a sneak attack because he must come out first if he wanted to attack. However, it was still very useful for sneak attacks, hiding, or in this special period. The young man sat down on the sofa in the living room, then reached out to his waist and buckled the lock. At the moment when the lock was closed, a strange fluctuation came from his waist. Everything in Luoya's vision seemed to be covered with a layer of gray color in an instant. From this moment on, Roja's influence on the real world was completely eliminated. For example, although he was sitting on the sofa in this space, there was no trace of him on the sofa in the real world. There wasn't even a dent in it. The black-haired young man looked at everything around him and nodded with satisfaction. Then he closed his eyes to rest. Look at what you've done, Matthews. In a dark room, a stack of documents on the table under the candlelight was slammed down. 2 black-robed men sat opposite to each other at the table. One was a middle-aged man named Matthews, and the other was a masked man with a hoarse voice. At this time Matthews, who was called by his name, bowed his head and did not speak. His eyes were on the top of the documents on the table. There was a portrait of a third-year female student at St. Freya Academy. Seeing Melty's portrait, Matthews thought for a moment and said with some respect, "I have noticed her, Sir Apostle. All her actions are under my control. You don't need to worry." Under your control? Oh, that's why I said that you people can't do anything big. This kind of person who finds a problem should be dealt with immediately as soon as there is a sign. She has been acting for a week. What are you waiting for? Chapter 285. It had been 3 days since Luoya's ambush. In these 3 days, Melty's life didn't change at all. According to her plan with Luoya, she still ran to a few fixed places every day. The commercial street, the musical instrument club, and the coffee shop were all places that Shirley had been to before. However, they were all public places with a lot of people during the holidays. Every time before nightfall, the girl would return to the dormitory with the crowd. She couldn't be alone, but she couldn't do nothing either. She had to ensure her safety and numb the enemy. This was Luoya's request for Melty. But it had to be said that this was a lot of pressure for an untrained young girl. Walking on the commercial street, Melty felt uneasy. Ever since Luoya told her the truth, the girl felt that she was being watched by someone. Although she tried her best to ignore it, the sixth sense was very serious today. A sense of crisis that was far stronger than usual grew in the girl's heart. Melty almost subconsciously understood one thing. The cultists were about to make their move. The girl's face stiffened and her hands trembled slightly. Her friends noticed that something was wrong with Melty and asked her about it with concern. The girl was silent for a moment. Luoya's warning and her senior's face appeared in her mind. In the end, she resisted the fear and smirked, attributing it to the pain of her period. This explanation was reasonable and didn't arouse anyone's suspicion. Melty followed the crowd back to the dormitory and closed the door. Then, she walked to the living room and hugged the pillow on the sofa. "Master, are you there?" "I'm here." The voice echoed in the girl's ears. Melty held back her tears for a long time. The girl hugged the pillow to cover half of her face and apologized with a hoarse voice. "I'm sorry, Master, Melty was sobbing on the side, and in the dark space the black-haired boy was sitting opposite her, looking at the frightened girl and sighing. "Hold on. I have a feeling that he will appear soon. This is the last moment." The gentle voice comforted the girl and made Melty nod slightly. After a long time, the girl wiped the tears on her face and finally forced herself to calm down. "Master Luoya, I'm sorry. I'm too timid." "No, you're already very brave." The black-haired boy looked at the strong girl and couldn't help but feel heartache. This tragedy really hurt too many people. Melty, who had persevered for so long, was almost at her limit. "It's time to end it." The boy held the cane thought and silently made a promise. "If I'm not wrong, there will be changes tonight. I swear to Shia, I will protect you. There shouldn't be a problem." In the forest in the southwest corner of the third dormitory area, a middle-aged man wearing a teacher's robe coldly stared at Murty's room. His hanging heart gradually calmed down. Although the apostle's strict orders made Matthews nervous, after a day of observation, Matthews didn't see anything wrong with Melty's actions. From the time she woke up and left the house to the places she went to, they were all the places she had been running around for the past few days. Although she had returned to the dormitory a little earlier these 2 days, that was nothing. As a student, she had been running around under the pressure of the academy for a week without any results. She didn't dare to feel tired or nervous. On the other hand, because the apostle was afraid of the new student, Matthews took the time to observe the so-called consultation department. However, the results made him feel less nervous. In the past few days, the so-called consultation department had students from the Purple Rose faction coming to cause trouble. Facing the third-year members of the Purple Rose, the first-year members of the consultation department were afraid. It was said that the 2 permanent deputy heads didn't dare to come. Every day, they stayed in the station to discuss countermeasures with that Luoya Akat. In order to avoid being seen as retreating, the Purple Rose faction even dug up a swimming pool and hired a bunch of coachmen to transport the soil. This kind of cowardly behavior made Matthews laugh. What Akat family? Isn't it just a noble family from the theocracy? How oversensitive. After his observation, Matthews did not care about the apostles' reasons for urging him. In his opinion, the apostles were once bitten, twice shy. The Akat family might have been a threat to them in the past, but that was all in the past. Fierce in one generation, how could they be fierce in the next? In the past few decades, Matthews had never heard of any big news about the Akat family. He didn't know much about them and had no interest in them. In his opinion, Leinster was the place with the highest density of extraordinaires. Any random scholar family would be much more powerful than them. Luoya was just a talented kid with a level 4 source. What could he do? Moreover, he was now being suppressed by the Purple Rose. The relationship between the two parties had worsened because of the confrontation before school started. He who was in the academy had seen it with his own eyes. Chapter 286. After 3 days of not eating, drinking, or sleeping, Luoya successfully waited for the prey. At the same time, in the nearby forest, the black-haired girl opened her eyes at Paul's reminder. The twin stone was a magic or unique to Xia. It was generally born when two were joined together. After being cut apart, when one of them was injected with curse power and emitted light, the magic in the other or would also be stimulated. A crimson light flickered in the small stone in Paul's hand like blood, as if reflecting the surging killing intent under Lillian's calm appearance at this time. The girl stood up, and the nearby guards in the name of the security department immediately stood up together, and quickly divided into 2 teams according to the previous plan. Let's go. It was a simple sentence, but it carried a weight that was completely different from usual. In the darkness of the night, the group split into 2 groups and rapidly approached their destination. At the same time, the hoarse caws of crows rang out in the wine cellar. The butchers who were stained with human blood raised their heads and looked at each other. News from the bishop. There's a situation. Evacuate according to the plan. With the announcement, the cultists were busy, but they didn't know that everything was already too late. Screams. This was the sound that the soft-hearted Luoya disliked the most in the past because it represented pain. When it appeared, it represented suffering and was often a harbinger of bad things. However, today's matter was different. In the house, listening to Matthew's screams, Luoya's depression that had accumulated for 3 days seemed to have been vented. The smile on his face became more and more brilliant with the passionate tone of his voice. The screams of a sinner may not be pleasant to the ears, but it was indeed satisfying. The teenager who hated evil as if it were his enemy commented, while the person who screamed leaned against the wall with an ashen face. Fellow student, what are you trying to do? Attacking a teaching staff is a serious violation of the law and school rules. Matthews, who only had one arm left, roared angrily, eager to buy as much time as possible. Since Luoya appeared here, the situation was obvious. The first-year ringmaster and his department, whom Matthew had always looked down on, had seen Meldy's letter. Not only that, but they also carried out a secret investigation, and even released a lot of smoke bombs. Luoya himself was waiting here. They had been exposed, so they had to retreat immediately. Matthew thought so in his heart, but on the surface he looked like he was just passing by innocently. Secretly, he began to condense his curse power to control his injuries and prepare a killer move. Waiting for the moment when Luoya hesitated, Matthews was certain that he had to severely injure Luoya before he could escape. This was because he had seen part of Luoya's battle when he first entered the academy. This was also the reason why he did not rush out of the room. Outside the dormitory was a forest with no mountains or rivers. Once they reached an open area, Luoya's Gulandair would be able to unleash its full potential. Matthew didn't want to race against the huge skeleton on flat ground. That was undoubtedly a dead end. I'm just a teacher on patrol. I came in to take a look after noticing a strange spell fluctuation in this room. That should be why you're hiding here. What are you trying to do? With this thought in mind, Matthew asked the young man in front of him in a righteous manner. Under his realistic acting skills, Luoya seemed to have really begun to hesitate. After a short silence, the black-haired young man's face flashed with surprise. He hurriedly asked, "You're a teaching staff of the academy. Do you have any evidence?" "I have a teaching staff ID in my pocket. I'm Matthew Scholar, the director of the Student Information Office. You're Luoya, right? I know your mentor. I'll never let this matter go." "What? You're not a cultist who came to take Melty's life?" This is a misunderstanding. The identity of a teaching staff played a big role at this time. The black-haired young man seemed to be really stunned by Matthew's mixed words. He was stunned at first. Then he waved his hand in a panic. He eagerly explained while injecting his curse power into the cane. I heard that this student was targeted by a cruel cultist, so I came to wait for her. I didn't expect to alarm my own people. This is really an unfortunate accident. Teacher, let me treat you. The black-haired young man picked up the cane with an apologetic expression. His face was full of guilt and sincerity. Matthew looked at the young man, and then looked at the cane in Luoya's hand. He could not help but be shocked. What a strong vitality aura. Although Shiya's curses and treatment methods were many, most of them had their flaws. For example, the Vatican's curses would divide a large part of the curse power to purify the body, and the human manipulation system's flesh and blood manipulation could easily cause the body to grow crooked. Only the form of vitality replenishment was the safest and most reliable treatment. Such an advanced treatment method must be very effective. Matthew, who had lost his arm and was in unbearable pain, thought so. His eyes lit up, and at the same time, he could not help but sneer in his heart. After all, he's just a kid. An idiot with strength but no experience. He panicked after a little scare. You're tuning into the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.